For me, the secret sauce, it was going to be like cider vinegar potato chips were our first thing. I thought we're off to the races with this that sold. But then when we did the vegetable chips, that was the secret sauce. That was the magic with Tyrrells. That was the bit that just took it off to the races. That was fantastic.
Have you been out in Ibiza much?
Yeah, and that's even changed quite a lot because it's quite a lot of sort of Northern European, Germans, Dutch, a lot of British, a lot of so most of the restaurants now have changed so much in the last 15 years.
What are your restaurants? Because I went there, I was there for a wedding in the summer. I think it's genuine paradise, Ibiza. But what is some of your favourite restaurants out there?
I think they come and go so much, but there's quite a lot of, there's even very small ones. There's like right up in the north, up towards Fortinax. There's ones like Café Gigi and places like that. So there's small ones that have been there or even sort of Annabelle's in Anita's in there are little ones that have been there for a long time, but they're just so simple. But they've been there. They're not this, there's some wonderful ones.
My friend took me to this tapas place. I don't know if it could be Anita's actually, or whatever it's called.
That's right in the middle at Sun.
Right in the middle, and it's like very small. The old tables, they kind of, you get what you're given.
And if it's the one with the old post boxes where the hippies used to be there in the 60s and it's quite... And then there are some like in Santa Gertrudis, is like Notting Hill with all the white SUVs parked outside.
Oh,
and they're
really?
They've gone to live in Santa Gertrudis. And then you've got Roots, which are very juice, smoothie led. So there's a lot of groups of people that are just jumping on the healthy food. So it's quite... It's quite an interesting space, but the Roots is a really good one because he's like quite genuinely what he's doing. But it's quite interesting. But these, how people there, because a lot of people apparently if they go to somewhere like Ibiza or something for a week, they're going to have their whole week planned, where they're going for lunch, where they're going for dinner, what they're doing. And they reckon since COVID, the whole sort of going out scene in the evenings has changed quite a lot now. It's more lunchtime and the whole lunch occasion than going out at night or whatever.
Unless you go to San Antonio where everyone's off their head.
Yeah. And that still works.
Yeah, that still works. No, it's mad. Are you good? I'm good to jump in if you are.
Okay.
We'll just kind of
No. I think on those things is I'll get rid of that. I'm talking about phones. I think for me it's like chapters in life. It's growing up. For me, I haven't grown up. I think I've been aware. I've spent 10 years of my life frying thousands of tons of ultra-processed chips, having carcinogenic warnings coming through all the time with a really smelly business. It was an exceptionally profitable business, so it did what I wanted it to at the time when I was just farming conventionally and just in business, just thinking solely of the cash. And then with the distillery, learning all about that alcohol business and how much people actually do drink. The fun side of it is going around the world, was trying cocktails in every single bar, so every importer, wherever. Is there another one somewhere? There is, isn't there?
That's your two phones. That's your...
don't trust a man with two phones.
Yeah. Well, I've got three phones. I feel like I should be selling CDs, illegal CDs as well, with the amount of phones I go around with.
So yeah, I think that's going around the world. And every mixologist would want you to try. So it's nothing to have a dose of, vodka espressos, espresso martinis in a night, and so then now to doing this, to going out to being on it's you change your mindset. So what's quite interesting with a brand and trying to make a brand, it's a bit like watching Alan Partridge when Steve Coogan is actually doing Alan Partridge. When he's at home and his whole life, he moves into Alan Partridge, so he does everything. He lives his life, so he doesn't miss a bit, so he gets totally into the character.
So getting into the character of the brand.
I think to be in the character of the brand is,
how do you get
everything.
So say a founder is Steve Coogan, and they are trying to be... We're rolling, by the way. Say a founder is Steve Coogan, and they are trying to embrace and embody Alan Partridge. Because I think you're right, the brand is an extension of the founder. And as you were saying, you've grown up and evolved, and the brands you've built have evolved in parallel/synergy with you. So it's like
good topic.
You go from crisps to booze. You then go on your health kick, as we were detailing earlier in Germany. You're now on the health thing. But how do you think, or why do you think it's important for founders to be like Steve Coogan and try and embody Alan Partridge?
but I think you have to be the part. You have to understand the brand. You have to understand your community. So you can't talk to community as objects. You have to talk to the community as your friends. So your friends, as you grow up, they probably evolve. You like the same sort of things. You have similar interests of the things you like to talk about. So I think that's the same with a brand and its community. They're like-minded. So I think for a brand to engage with its community and to talk about without being mustn't be dictating to them. And that's, for me personally, it's like selling snacks. It's not rocket science. It's quite easy to sell a packet of fried snacks, and then with alcohol, it's not too difficult. The object of people wanting to drink alcohol, what they want back from it in return. And then if you're going to sell them healthy fermented foods, it's what they want back from that in return. So it's a totally different side.
So yeah, I understand. So being best friends with your brand as best friends with the consumer, I get that with crisps. People love crisps. I get that with booze. People love booze. I think there's a massive struggle, not with just Willy's, but with this healthy living, gut health.
Yeah.
What are the challenges with becoming best friends? Because it's a massive education piece as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I could talk about this one for hours because that's such a fantastic point. So I think it's everybody wants to lead a healthier, better life. They want to make more use of their time. They don't want to be on their phone. They want to be free. They want their mind to be free. We all want our mind to be free. And that's where things like ADHD, bipolar, dyslexia, whatever you bring, all these different conditions, how you'll, if we come back to that, is how you get there. So to manage it, we all know our gut is our second brain. And that's the first thing I learned with this business. So that changed my thought process, that learning that if we feed our gut with healthy food and it's healthy and it's happy, our brain, with the vagus tract, our brain will be happy.
What's the vagus tract?
So the vagus tract is your link between your gut to your brain. So now our gut is basically our second brain.
Right.
Or it's so what we feed our gut will exactly, and this has been proven so many times, and there's so many people now that have proven that if you give up bread, give up gluten alone, how after a few weeks you will feel so completely different to be free from gluten. And if you do so for what they call a leaky gut, it just completely frees. It just absorbing, getting all that gluten into your blood, into your brain. So the vagus tract, the connect between the two, that is everything. That is, so we basically are what we eat. Whether we're drinking coffee or if we're having ultra processed foods, we know all these things are bad for us. Probably the best example is sugar. Well, the one thing I've learned about this business now is ultra-processed foods, and mainly processed sugar, is probably the worst thing of all for us, because there's been trials in the 30s, 40s and 50s where they fed rodents on processed sugar and cocaine, and the rodents would rather go for the processed sugar than the Coke, and then they took the processed sugar away and put natural sugars in the same form, and the rodents would rather go for the Coke than go for the natural sugar. So sugar, what people don't understand, it is addictive. And so now with the likes of Coca-Cola and putting sugar on everything, processed sugar on everything, we know it's bad for us, but we're not aware of how much. That's why things like the sugar tax, that's why I'm so much in favour of that, because I think it should have been, in the past, we would have been better off having a tax on sugar, silver spoon sugar, than we would have been on Benson and Hedges, because children aren't really, you know what I mean? It all starts with the kids and us growing up and our mentality. And when people talk about obesity and mental health, probably the processed sugar is probably one of the biggest culprits of this today.
So the second brain, because I think with gut health, as a category, I believe there's like champagne problems and CocoPop problems. So by this I mean, so a lot of challenger brands start as champagne problems. So they're set up by middle-class founders solving creating middle-class brands, solving middle-class problems. And that's great for those early adopters, people with money. And I think sort of kombucha is one of these examples, maybe apple cider vinegar, maybe kind of high protein crisps or cereal. It's like champagne brands. And I think the challenger brand may start as solving a champagne problem, middle class brand, middle class problem. But as it goes across the adoption curve to go mainstream, it starts thinking about the CocoPop problem. By the CocoPop problem, I mean not necessarily going for shoppers who are in like, how do you speak to a shopper who's not thinking about the champagne problem, which is gut health? They're thinking about what are the price of Coco Pops, because I'm a single mother in Rotherham who's got 2 kids to feed, and my only concern at the minute is the price of Coco Pops. And I think brands need to move from champagne to Coco Pops. Tyrrells did this perfectly, right? So Tyrrells started as, premium upmarket crisps, but the journey to the Coco Pop problem is people get, oh, fuck me, those crisps are delicious. Same with booze. The journey's very easy from champagne to Coco Pops, if that makes sense.
Yeah, good point.
I don't with this, I feel like there's a lot of hurdles because, for example, the Coco Pop consumer is thinking, how do I get food on the plate for my kids? And Henry Dimbleby's book does a great, if you read Ravenous, does a great job of talking about this. It's not the mums and the mums and dads, they don't have, half the reason the food system's fucked is because they don't have the time to educate themselves on like what they're actually eating. It's just like, I need to get food for my kids to eat. And also a lot of these kids are eating beige foods because they don't want to, not that they don't want to try, it's just easier for them. It's another problem off the mum's mind just to say, right, I'll give them chicken nuggets because they'll eat it, right? How do you think, as a category, not just Willys, how do you think we go from this champagne, middle-class, bougie problem? I think we were talking earlier about, it's kind of health retreats, drinking this stuff. How do we go along that kind of tumultuous journey to whereby we can get the whole country in on this gut health thing, understanding the second brain? Like, what does that journey look like on the prudent path?
It's obviously 100% education.
Yep.
And our education in food in the last 60, 70 years has gone, as you said, is knackered. It's gone so far off track. Not just the food, the farming has gone off track as well, because the farmers have tried to keep up with this demand for ultra-processed, sugar-laden. And they do say that if you eat anything that was around over 100 years ago, it's good for you. So olive oil, good quality butter with old-fashioned style cows. We had a conversation last night about cows and dairy products and lactose. People do not understand there's so much in there that if you drunk old-fashioned cow milk, some sort of Guernseys and Jerseys, that milk is far more nutritiously better for you than modern bred Friesian and these modern cows. And it's completely different. So that's just a little bit on the dairy side. Then we've got the gluten on the bread, how modern bread varieties have been bred for volume. And then we've got through the whole food spectrum. So to bring it to that point, to make it simple, this is why I like regenerative farming and regenerative food, because in the strapline is nutritionally dense foods. So what everybody's got to understand is that it's not volume. We should not be buying. So back to, food should be cheap. Farmers have reacted to producing food, and the food industry, from Unilever, Kraft, all of the big brands, have focused on convenience and volume. Nobody's talked about nutrition. Yeah. So the whole nutrition is, look at margarine. Margarine is not a good product. Look, the best example of how knackered the food industry is at the moment is plant-based milks. Every cafe and every restaurant has got a pallet of Oatly in there somewhere. In the middle of the farm here, we've got a vending machine that sells coffee. We've got to have plant-based milk in there for even now, as most of it is still local real cow milk. But plant-based milk, you get a packet of Oatly, read the back, it's got 10% oats in there. So you're buying something that's done 1,000 food miles on every packet before it's even probably got to the retailer, and then it's got 10% of the product in it. So what's in the rest of it? If I was spending, however much on a packet of oat milk, what's in it beside the 10% oats that I thought I was buying? And I think it's simple little questions like this, how the whole food industry, from convenience, but everybody's taught at the moment they've got to be on plant-based, they've got plant-based milks. And so there's so misunderstanding about nutrition and food. So I think nutrition-dense foods, we sort of lost the whole nutrition thing. So even chefs and cooking, people are knocking things up quickly. We've got all the speedy joints, but it's even like take meat. People breeding cows for the good ones, for the marbling in the meat. But if they're all smashed up and turned into burgers, you don't need any marbling. You know, it's like chicken. If it's all just smashed up and stuffed into, like nuggets is the best example. There's a massive chicken plant near here where the nuggets are just the leftovers, the last few percent. Once they've had their joints and things off a chicken, they steam off all of the bits and pieces and stuff them together in a mold and call them a nugget. So that's where we've got to with the food industry. So I think nutrition is the most misunderstood thing today. And from my travels in the last couple of years, I think going to Bhutan has probably been the best thing for my mental health and nutritional health.
Where's Bhutan?
Bhutan is just in the Himalayas. It's just up above sort of Kathmandu. It's only 1 million people. It's run by this like a little magic kingdom. It's run by one person. It's probably the best place if you ever want to see Buddhism or you want to learn about Buddhism. It's a phenomenal place.
What are the one or two things there that really
and what stands out with
improved your mental health?
Is the food hasn't changed in Bhutan for the last 100 years. So they all have little markets in every town. It's all fresh veg. It's just buckwheat. The only corn, there's no gluten at all, hardly. There's no obesity. Everybody's really fit. There's nothing. There's no fancy cars. There's not a capitalist society. They're all on a level. So if you want to talk about mental wellness and stress and things, and that's where I went there with the ADHD thing. I was told it was better to go and talk to the Buddhists than it was to go and see a specialist about ADHD, and it probably is.
What did the Buddhists tell you about your ADHD?
They told me that I got a monkey mind.
Describe the monkey mind.
Buddhism calls the monkey mind anybody is thinking faster than other people, or they're thinking about. Now at the moment, the monkey mind, ADHD is seen as a quality for companies like Microsoft and different large companies where they want people that can actually think outside the box. So if you've got a problem and an issue to solve, if you can get individuals who are capable of thinking outside the box, so whether it's bipolar, whether it's ADHD, whatever you call it, in Bhutan they call it the monkey mind.
What are the other types of minds?
They just have two types of mind in most Buddhism. You have the different things, because obviously you've got different Buddhas for different occasions and different lines. But for my particular instance, that's what I learned, because it's all about mental wellness. And if you want to learn about food, nutrition and mental wellness, there is nowhere better in the world than Bhutan, because they've escaped for the last 100 years. They've had no wars, they've had no integration from other countries, nobody's managed to get in there. It's the most amazing place in the world if you really want to study mental wellness and food culture.
Oh my days, I've been working on something very special. Introducing the Hungry Sales Secrets Workshop. 14 unshakable challenger brand sales secrets that you'll never find on a Mars training program taught by Ian in beige chinos. I'm sorry, Ian. This is going to help your team creatively think outside the box to unlock more listings. Stop selling, start storytelling to actually get buyers on board with your brand. Stand out and be memorable versus every other boring account manager. I've used these secrets to unlock listings at Ocado, Whole Foods, Milk & More, Planet Organics, Selfridges, Crosstown Donuts, Booths, Harrods, Black Sheep Coffee, M&S, Harvey Nicks, loads of wholesalers. I use these same principles and secrets to turn Hungry from literally nothing in my parents' bedroom to my full-time gig through selling sponsorship. I've used the secrets to land guests I literally had no right to when I had like 313 followers. Julian Metcalf, Seth Godin, James Bailey, Roy Sutherland, tons more. Last year, I ran the workshop for Course and Press. They absolutely loved it. Next week, I'm running it for Vita Coco. If you want to take your sales team to another level, if you want to know my secrets, email me, alwayshungrydan@gmail.com. So what they've said you've got this monkey mind. I get that kind of diagnosis. What did they say were some of the solutions to deal with that? Because I feel like I've got a mendacious little sort of thug running around my head sometimes, and it's a superpower, but it's also can be quite detrimental and menacing. What did they? Yeah, what are the lessons you took from Bhutan about managing your monkey mind, which you probably wouldn't get if you were to go to central London to some fucking 10 grand a session shrink? So
the first thing is to eat properly, because the one thing we haven't discussed yet is that I've given up alcohol now, and I'm about 240 days into it. and I'm totally free. And the only way I can do it now, I've got some beautiful red wines I'd love to drink, but I'm not going to touch them again. I've gone totally cold turkey on it because I can't have one glass, because I think if I have one glass, it can quite easily turn into two. And I feel totally different.
There's the James Dean quote, which is, one drink's perfect, two's too many, three's not enough.
Yes.
And I think it's basically that. Is you just, before you know it, I'm the same. Just like a ravenous hurricane drinking.
And if you're that sort of character, Tom Kerridge is probably a great one to talk to about this as well, because he said, how'd you give up? And he said, well, once I had one beer, the next thing I probably had 10 if I was cooking all night and I was drinking beer.
He would drink a pint. I listened to a podcast with him. He would drink a pint of Negroni after service as his opening
some
gambit.
nights, a big night, he'd get through 8 or 10 pints as he's cooking and...
Crazy.
And it goes on, so your body goes on and wants more and more. So
Bhutan. So they said caging the monkey mind is getting rid of the booze.
Yeah.
One. What else?
Getting rid of the booze. The second thing is exercise, and exercise now is. When I mean exercise, it's getting up in the morning, and places like Lanzerhof are very good mentors for things like this as well. So when you wake up, is to get outside. Just go outside. Wake up with the world. Just go out and spend, even if it's a walk, even if it's a 5-minute walk, it's better. I runs ideally. I try and go every day now at 5 o'clock, and I try wherever I am in the world. I go for a walk. I try and go for a run at that time, because if you've got nothing else to think about, there's no excuse not to go and do it at that time of day. Whereas the rest of the day, you'll find excuses. You can't do it because of this and that. So I think first thing, if you can condition yourself to get up, first thing with probably giving up booze and toxics is you're actually awake then in the mornings. I'm still awake at 4:30, and I was worried that would I ever find a way of getting rid of the 4:30 darkness in my life? And I don't think I ever will. Those monkeys, once one starts banging the cymbals together, the next thing there's 2, then you remember something else and there's 3. And
describe the 4 a.m. darkness. I was up at 4 this morning. I just never sleep in other places. I just don't. Even though you're a wonderful hotel, which I appreciate, I just don't. But yeah, describe the 4 a.m. monkeys clattering away with their drums. What does that detail in your head?
And that's what they talk about with the monkey mind, that once you wake up, it's how you condition your mind, what you're thinking about. So the first thing you have to do is breathe. If you start breathing properly, and instead of lying in bed cogitating or just getting up and doing some scrolling or having a cup of tea or coffee and thinking about it, get up and go for a walk and go and have that free your mind and try and walk backwards or do something different, but go and do something different. And wake up with the world. So when the world's waking up, that's a fantastic experience. Doing that and breathing. But if you cogitate on these things, you end up just thinking about things, and you're wishing and you're dreaming things are happening, and they don't happen. And I think you make it worse.
Yeah, there's a Stoic quote which is, imagination is always worse than reality. And I think I love that, because you can just, as you say, cogitate, whatever the word is, and stew and fester in your own kind of imagination. Which is detrimental. With the is it how do you say it? Bhutanist.
Bhutan.
Bhutanist. Yeah. I was going to try Budapest and so in Bhutan. So booze, walk, relinquish the monkey mind. What are the other things you took from that?
The most important thing probably is food, is to eat well.
So what do you eat
properly.
now? What's your diet now on a weekly basis?
I try and cut out all bread. Bread is the devil's food. If you can take bread completely out.
What does bread do to you?
It's just the gluten in it. It's just.
But what does that actually?
It just is the devil's food.
But as in, how does the devil's food kind of pour fire on the devil in your head? Because one thing I want to talk to you today about, mate, is the link between food and mental health. And I think half the battle, back to my original point of this champagne versus CocoPop problem, I think gut health is a great present wrapped in the wrong packaging. And people don't understand it at the minute.
Gut health and mental health
are linked
so close together.
But I think the way you'll get shoppers on a macro level, the CocoPop shoppers, to understand it is they don't get your second brain. They don't get the Manchurian tract thing, whatever the fuck it was called. But they will understand if we can package it in a way. They probably don't even get it's regenerative farming is a complex word, even though I don't understand that. But I think if you can package it very simply in terms of how this is good for your head, I think more and more people, it will move along the adoption curve from a middle class problem to a mass market basically.
See, on that point, what's quite interesting, when I had this conversation with a lot of people, and quite often asked question is, It's an organic food, just as you said, just for the people who can be seen to be able to afford it, and it's not affordable for the masses. And my take on that would be that, and I'm not saying organic, it's whether it's free range or whatever, it does have a premium, but you're buying more nutrients. So you could live, anybody could buy, if you can buy it in the right places, can buy it. But it's what you bulk up on. It's what you've got to bulk up on vegetables instead of expensive, lacking nutritious, ultra-processed foods. If you compare, what's that film, Kiss the Earth? Did you see with that one? Who's the guy from Google that came from Asia? And he said when they grew up, they used to have a little piece of meat and they used to share it between the family and all bulk up on rice and lots of veg. And then when he moved to LA, he said there were 10-year-old children having a same-sized piece of meat that the whole family would have.
I think what's crazy and astonishing is when you go to an American airport. So last year, the beginning of this year, I was in Miami Airport and New York Airport. Yeah. The food offering is repugnant. Like it is it's all just everything you're saying, absolute shit. The drinks are that big, they're full of sugar, and makes the UK look like a darling example. I think what Henry talks about in Ravenous, he talks about going to Japanese hospitals because the Japanese hospital food is amazing. Yes. He talks about how you literally have it's just clean water. It's almost being in a kind of serene sanctuary because you just get very clean. It's fish. And I think it's
so you'd probably say like Japan is a sophisticated style of sort of Bhutanese, because Bhutanese is very basic because it's never been influenced by other parts of the world for the last 100 years. But Japan, you listen to a lot of chefs and they say, what's your favourite place to go inspired for food in the world? And it's always sort of Italy first. But Japan is quite often second, and quite often now Japan's coming first. It is. For that reason.
The Japanese foods, but I think what Henry talks about in the book is actually the Japanese got fat for quite a period of time. People see them as this this kind of slim nation, but for a long time they were having a lot of fried food. They had katsu curries, which were obviously hugely calorific. And I don't know there was a turning point where they actually went more into this kind of clean eating on a huge macro level.
On a world scale.
Yeah.
As well, if we're talking about the whole world, I went to do a food show last spring in India, in Delhi, and it's the biggest Indian food show they have. And it's like going back in time 60 years. The biggest thing for sale is sugar, and it's like syrups. The biggest stand in the middle is selling, I shouldn't use the brand, but it's a well-known brand, and every show in the world, they've got a huge display of just sugar, and it's sugar-laid syrups. So India now going through this massive, and probably it's only the top of India, the ones that can afford to go to these, food shows or buy this stuff from these multi-large shops. But it's just phenomenal. The sugar explosion in the world, I'd say the biggest danger is sugar. I think ultra-processed sugar has a lot probably to answer for in the last 60, 70 years.
I think this whole sugar thing was a problem baked in a solution, because it was the guy, again, Henry talks about this in the book, it was World War II. We needed something to feed people. So the guy came up with, the guy, I'm forgetting his name, came up with a thing to produce that corn syrup, which meant we could feed people during the war. Ultimately, it got everyone through World War II. And that was a solution, but then it created this huge change in consumers' appetites. People became addicted to sugar, and then ultimately you get to where we are now, which is people are heinously addicted to sugar. And I think on a much deeper level, it always is. In any solution, there's a problem, and in any problem, there's a solution. Actually, if you look hard enough, what would you say? So just thinking this back to this. Champagne shopper versus CocoPop shopper. What do you think are the problems in terms of making this mainstream? Do you know what I mean?
I'd say it's habit. Getting people to break habits. The whole of Europe had never touched Coca-Cola until the war, and then for Coke to get around the sugar tax because they're restricted sugar, if they gave free Coca-Cola to all their GIs, all their guys that were out fighting in Europe, they were allowed as much sugar as they liked by the American government. So Coke took advantage of that, and they made masses to give away to all the troops. So they reckon that just really drove Coke into all. So it wasn't just chewing gum and tights and things. Coke,
isn't that why it's called an Americano because of the war, isn't it?
That's exactly, yeah.
Yeah, because the troops wanted the black coffee, and then they
that's
turned.
It. And then it was dreamt up. Like when I was young, there's been an advert for Mars bars, and Mars a day will help you work, rest, and play.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like Coke. People used to drink Coke because they thought it would give them energy. So, and then modern take on it is they'll have a Red Bull, and a Red Bull will give them energy to stay awake or to give them energy to go playing sports.
What were so with this Bhutan place? What are the other kind of weird lessons you took from there that you could help our listeners who may not be able to access Bhutan?
Where society would be today if we weren't spoilt by the last 60, 70 years of intervention of sugar, convenience, and disruption, I suppose, to be contented, not in a capitalist society as well. It's quite interesting to see a society that's not driven by greed and by money. And they say envy is probably one of the biggest things at the moment, and this desire that everybody should. You hear about children that they should be, to grow up in Bhutan, so long as you care for the soil or you care for whatever profession you know what I mean, and you're a good human being. That's all that. That's how people measure themselves.
Why is envy an issue?
I think in our modern society, it's this hunger, isn't it? It's you watch all of the social media now, and it's bettering. It's always something better to go and buy and to do.
Yeah.
It's sort of whether you're going to trade on investing or whatever you're going to do. It's to be.
We derive identity from power. There's a book called The Bonfire of Vanities by Tom Wolfe. Amazing book. It was actually written in the 80s, and it was just on the cusp of neoliberalism. So Margaret Thatcher comes in. I think it was Nixon as well. Yeah. And they were right. Like everyone's going to really fucking flux capitalism into everyone. It was kind of the age of Wall Street where people could go and make a shitload of money, but they started to define their identity through. This book was written in the 80s through their work. Yeah. And this is way before social media. So you're reading the book, and the main protagonist is a guy called Sherman McCoy, who thinks he's a master of the universe, who is on Wall Street, actually ends up running over this guy from the Bronx, this very lower class person, and it's his fall from grace. And I think one of the issues now on the envy point is that everyone through social media can be a master of the universe on social media, but actually behind closed doors, it's creating this toxic envy culture of, as you say, one bettering up and stuff. And I think, I'd love to know what Bhutan's solution to that would be.
So there'd be there isn't any to start with, but there'd be no paid support or no paid customer influencers, and there's everything would be on a really fine level. So to see society, probably the average car is a Fiat Panda, or it's nobody's measured by the cars or whatever they've got or how they live. They all wear the same sort of clothes. They all live in this society where it's once you get into the airport, the kindness. The one thing that's amazing that comes in front of everything is just the sheer kindness, how they genuinely are.
Very an example of that.
Very kind people. Just to go and see the way they respect, I suppose, the respect they all have for each other. That would probably be the best example. So even in restaurants, wherever you are, they all sort of worship the king. So it's the king is his kingdom. It's like a kingdom still, where they believe in the whole regime. So there's no sort of disciplines and things needed as such to control it, because they haven't got influences of different societies that have come in and changed their culture. They've managed to keep the culture running, and it'd be impossible for any of our Western society or to change and go back. So it's just interesting to go and see how a country would be today if it managed to survive the last 100 years without being how people would be evolving today. So as you said, probably the worst thing is these things, are phones, having that constant access to so much information. These guys just don't have that. They just don't. So they're not asking these constant questions of why and how. They know what good food is. They know, do you know what I mean? They know the simpler things in life, because from from what we said as well with social media, the more you see, the more
you're comparing your blooper reel to someone's highlight reel.
Yes.
And there's someone I know who's a big influencer. Like her Instagram, it's her doing cartwheels on the beach, literally saying living my best life.
Yeah.
I know from other people, like she's bulimic, like can't even eat, has almost OCD about eating a square of chocolate, and it's like she's got on social media a highlight reel, but behind the scenes is people's blooper reel.
Yeah.
We almost need another social media which is like I feel shit, and actually just saying this is what's actually going on in my life. So you've described your bipolar or like self-diagnosed bipolar, I think. Like describe the texture of your thoughts when it's high and when it's incredibly low, because a lot of founders I know who listen to this may not have the same extremes as yourself, but the journey is that. So describe the difference between the two.
I think the main thing is managing expectations, and that's just a beautiful saying. It's in life what you expect out of it. So, and the thing is, the more you have and the more you see, the more you sort of want and gain all the time. So for me, the whole bipolar by being ADHD or however you want to categorize it, do we need to be categorized? Because we are all different anyway. And when I was not that long ago, when I was young, sort of like a mental illness was you had mental illness and you were sort of weak and locked away and should put yourself together. Now everybody's got different degrees of it, and we have this wavy line where we're either high or low. But then, do we get too far hung up with all of that stuff as well? And it's a really tricky point that how you control it. And so for me personally, I accepted the fact that I didn't want to accept the fact. Like when I had a tumour in my gut, I didn't want to accept that. But then when you accept it and you know how to deal with it, and you know how to manage it, life's totally different. So when I had ADHD, and I actually accepted it, and I did the test, and then it actually has helped me. So a lot of the time I feel with ideas and different things that you want, it's the frustrations in wanting to do things and being able to execute them, because there's millions of ideas in the graveyard. There's so many ideas out there, but ideas into action, that's what I guess people call success, isn't it? So it's for me, it is identifying it, but then I don't want to polarize. I'm a bit sort of, I don't want to polarize myself and put myself in a pigeonhole, and I don't think any of us do. We're not all the same, we are all different, but we do have this line that we fluctuate. I think some people have a line that doesn't fluctuate much. Their highs and lows aren't too far apart. For me, I have, as you were saying, I think a lot of us do have these big highs and lows. It's a delicate
dance. It's one of those things which it's both wrong and right. So on the one hand, you need to be cognizant that you may have this up and down in ADHD. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't, you're just being self-destructive.
Yes.
But on the other hand, if you just think, oh, I've got bipolar or I've got ADHD, then you're kind of limiting yourself. So you want to say, well, yeah, maybe I do have those things, but like, let's still crack on. Mm-hmm. So it's this delicate dance between when you are feeling low, it's like, oh shit, this is the bipolar kicking in. Yeah. But like, you don't want to be like, say you are feeling a little bit low, which you could do a walk, shake off the monkey mind and go and crack on and come here today. So it is a delicate balance. It's nuance between how you deal with it. And I think you're so right. If you just box yourself in, then you really box yourself in. But yeah, describe the texture when it's really low, like.
And that's what we all want to get rid of. If you suffer the low, I've suffered the lows.
What's been the lowest?
Probably, I had a really bad time when I was in my late 20s and I actually went bankrupt, and I got so low, I could understand why people committed suicide, put it like that. So that was my lowest.
What would the thoughts be in your head when you woke up?
Well, when you're thinking about it, and it's like suffocating. So it's like the lows, and I think that's what a lot of people don't understand with people that do commit suicide, is that it's an escape. It's your brain. And you know, people quite often say, well, they should have talked to me, or it's not as simple as that. It's when it's closing in on you. It's closing in on you. So it's learning how to deal with it. And for me, when it was with the business and everything was closing in on me, So for me to escape, I sort of ran away and went to Australia for, and that was sort of always in my story, and that's how I, sort of escaped. But then I sort of came back and worked out a way of beating it. So it's a way of escaping when the world's closing in on you, and it's just the same in a smaller sense, that if you're having a dark moment. And it's almost like claustrophobic. So if you're traveling on this line, I can understand how people feel with the darkness, that you just don't want to think about it. And this is where ADHD and bipolar is really interesting, and then how the sort of Buddhists deal with it and how people deal with it. And is it a product of our diet, of our society, where we're all going to, because we're feeding these things with different products. So probably this is where alcohol comes into it big time for me, because it's a good thing in some ways to have a drink in the evening, to take yourself down there.
Yeah.
But the trouble is, the next day, instead of starting back up there where you should be starting the day, you're starting the day on...
I'm not boozing at the minute.
On a negative. And so you'll find every day you're starting up here. You're starting a lot cleaner, very clear, so you're ready to take it. So you're starting closer to where you want to be, because we all want to be up there. We don't want to be down here. We want to be up there. Yeah. So anything you can do. So if you can forego that drink in the evening to get you back, to get you back there the next day, and how can you do this without dictating? And so how can we educate people? It's like is there life without alcohol? And if you don't go out and you don't go anywhere, like in the past, all my skiing trips and everywhere I've been with a bunch of guys, and you go out without alcohol. I went to the Monaco with a bunch of guys to the historic Grand Prix, and it was a fantastic day. But it was, if you're not drinking and everybody around you's drinking, and all through the day they're getting louder and louder and louder, and so you're and if you're not drinking and you're not if you're without the alcohol is quite an interesting part. So it's only so much San Pellegrino and green teas you can drink. And so it's just an interesting space that could you go. And a lot of people I know deliberately don't go out because if they've given up the alcohol, because they know they'll get so tempted back into, because it's a social occasion, isn't it? Births, deaths, marriages, everything is all celebrated with alcohol. We all celebrate.
Yeah, no, as I say to you, I'm sober at the minute, but I go through stages of insidious amounts of drinking, but I actually feel better without it. So just if you could, because I'm trying to describe this, because I'm been meditating a lot recently and sort of separating myself from that incessant voice, or that demon is what people say. If you could sort of personify and almost describe what that demon in your head looks like, and how it speaks to you on those low moments.
Yeah, I think it's like success breeds success. When you're on a roll, everything you do that makes it better gets better and better. I think when you're falling, everything that goes wrong, you can look at more things on the negative side as well. So I think it's...
And what's it saying to you? Is it saying
it's
like...
It's almost like suffocating, isn't it? Because when you're feeling low, you're looking at everything on a negative side. So how you break out of that to reboot your mind, so you're looking at things in a positive way. So with the business where I am now, that's what I've learned so much about. If you can remove the ultra processed foods, if you can remove the alcohol, that's a massive, you can condition your body to get through that. So
you really believe that the diet and the
100%. If we changed our diet, we're all diet led. That's why I think we should all be talking about nutritionally dense foods and not ultra processed bulk industrial processed foods. And my story goes, I've been a farmer for many, many years, trying to produce large and larger crops every year. If you look out there, see all those fields, they're all clean, they're all free of weeds. They're all very probably sterile crops, a lot of them are just looking for the tons. Because when you're a farmer producing food, you just have to produce tons. You don't care about the nutrition. Nobody's interested. Dairy farmers, everybody, they're not interested in the butterfats or the quality of the nutrition of the food. They're just interested in that. No farmers are paid for nutrition. They're just paid for bulk.
It's just such a again in have you read Ravenous? But yeah, it's such a good book. But I think one of the issues with this is it's like, we had a simple, almost the Bhutan is utopia, right? Let's say Bhutan's the utopia. We have the war which we need to fix. We have to win the war, otherwise we're fucked by Nazi Germany, right?
Yes.
But it's a big problem to have. I'll take a few CocoPops for that, you know? Yeah. We solve that problem, but then we create a problem within that, which is this food issue. And as Henry says, it's such a complex system. The whole food system is so complicated. On the one hand, you've got these big bosses at Mars, PepsiCo, who, if they don't grow, they're going to get fired. And on the most basic human level, people need to look after their family. You know, it's people on a family basis are socialists. They need to look after their family. So you've got. It's not like these are as Henry says, they're not these demagogues who are trying to make people unwell and fat. You've got that. You've then got a whole array of government programs trying, the sugar tax being one. You've then got these issues with these single parent families whereby, as I said, it's the CocoPop problem, which is I just need to feed my kids. Yep. And I think what I took from the book is it's almost, we need to try lots of different things. And almost that nudging theory, you do enough little nudges, some will work, some won't. Yeah. If I was to say to you, and almost if we were trying to get to, say, a Bhutan-esque utopia, or maybe utopia is too strong a word, but a better place in the next 40 years, what are some of the things you'd be doing from from a macro perspective to really, really change things?
I think on what you say there, the most important thing now that they say 80% of the food we eat is in the hands of 8 companies.
Yes.
And now they're just working on their bottom line. They're just out there to make money. It's as simple as that. They don't care about nutrition or anything in those food. All they're interested is that bottom line. So things won't change. Like Keir Starmer, one of new Labour government was supposed to be to put the sugar tax in. I think that'd be phenomenal if anybody could ever bring a sugar tax in, but actually get people to understand the difference between natural sugar and ultra-processed sugar. But a sugar tax would be phenomenal. But I hear now that for them to put a sugar tax in, they've got to get permission off Unilever, Kraft, and all those 8 companies first have got to endorse it. Well, those 8 companies are never going to endorse a sugar tax, because with a sugar tax, they're not going to make any money, and they'll all be those companies would disappear. So, to be a practical mind, we're never going to do that. It's like Brexit. They talk about taking us back into Europe. We're never going to go back into Europe because we'd have to give up the pound. Can you see people in Britain giving up the pound? So it's like it's the culture of how we live and work. So with our food being in such few hands, it's such a fine system. As we look from going through COVID, that nutrition is the last thing on the list. So I think with gut health, mental health, we've got to look at the whole nutrition in our food. And there are some great ambassadors like Tim Spector and 1 or 2 others are doing now. There's some wonderful people explaining it. But as you said, this is just to your champagne top end. It's how you have healthy food available for everybody at a price. But the education, I think the most important thing is to educate humans on the benefits of, and I've seen it. My personal story, I fried thousands of tons of potato chips, of crisps, constant warnings off the government on acrylamides.
What's acrylamides?
Acrylamides is a carcinogenic value in the oil when you cook over 50 degrees.
So that's what makes crisps unhealthy.
Yeah. You've got most fried foods are all carcinogenic. They're some of the worst things you can have are ultra processed. So you've got constant warnings of all that, and then you've got sort of from alcohol. You've got alcoholism. I've had my time in that as well. So I've seen it from the producing side as well as the consumer side. So it's the psychology of where we are. I don't want to be like a hypocrite or So I've discovered, but we're all learning. I think in our lives we're all learning how, and we don't want to be dictated to. Like a lot of people, the whole sort of non-alcoholic thing is led by people that are almost preaching. And some people are thinking, no, I deserve my drink. I want my gin and tonic at 6 o'clock, or it relaxes me. So, you know what I mean? I'll have my ultra-processed foods or my Coco Pops because they...
Yeah. I also think Rory Sutherland talks about the theoretical perfect, which is a utopia, versus the adjacent possible. Yes. And actually these ideas move on the adjacent possible. So the theoretical perfect is everyone's walking around bare feet, like in Bhutan, drinking kombucha, taking walks, unleashing the monkey mind, doing yoga. Like that is just is a great thing to aim for, but it's just never going to be perfect. But the theoretical, the adjacent possible is like, okay, what can we do a little bit to get that weight. So with alcohol, the whole alcohol-free movement's actually booting off, not because loads of people are not drinking or going teetotal. It's actually because the mass, there's a few people doing that, but the mass are actually doing the adjacent possible, which is, okay, say I'm going out 3 times a week. One night, I'll cut off the booze. On the Thursday, on the Friday, I'll have 3 pints and 3 Lucky Saints. On a Saturday, I'll have 8 pints and 1 Lucky Saint. It's the adjacent possible which gets these movements to spread. And I'm just trying to think, what would the adjacent possible be? Because I feel at the minute the whole category of this kombucha and wellness is people are not saying you specifically, but on a macro level, it's a champagne problem. It's like, this is the theoretical perfect. You have to do all these fucking things, do these protocols, eat rabbit food and stuff like that. Sorry, like that. But it's like, how do we get to a place where it's like a bit like the alcohol-free movement, which is the adjacent possible, which is more people doing slightly healthier increments. So where it's like, do you I don't know. I suppose one example of this would be, I actually do think putting the calories on menus at pubs is actually a really good example of that. It's like a little thing to do, but it's like, okay, I won't have the pie. You know, you do enough people not having the pie and having the bread.
But if you had more of a nutritional value versus, because I think that's where people go wrong, and that's where Weight Watchers went wrong.
I'm just going to check those cameras, I'm listening.
Okay, well, people suddenly started dropping out on calories, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's the thing, is it's all good. The calories are...
It's this thing, understanding calories, and calories are not bad, but it's just about nutrition, and I think it's education on nutrition, and the only people who are going to educate are going to be the people who really do give a monkeys, the people at the top of the pyramid, that they want value for their money, so they do value whether it's organic or regenerative or, you know, however it's produced, if it's free range, whatever, they actually value the nutrition. But that's a really good point of yours there, because, you know, we went from the one extreme having traffic lights where you have red, amber and green.
What was the traffic lights?
It was a traffic light system for whether it was fat or how much sugar it had got into it, was whether we were just going to have traffic lights. So instead of having the ingredients on the back, you're going to have traffic lights. Whereas, and making food in the last 20 years with brands, this is something that I found fascinating all the time, because it's there to go into something like the Distillery where you didn't have to put any nutritional facts on the back about it at all, to doing something with like the crisps where you do. Whereas now, what we're making now, nutritional facts, if you're buying something that's good for you and healthy for you, it's even more important to understand. So if, say, Tyrrells was organic, would that have made a difference? I don't think it would have done, because crisps are crisps. We looked at it with the alcohol. You know, we had the farm, the story. People didn't care about that. When they're drinking alcohol, they just want to... It's all about the cocktails and the occasion and the fix. But something like this, if you're making a healthy food product that people are taking every day as a catalyst to put on their food, to bring their food to life, to add probiotics and to add live nutrients to their food, then that's the hardest bit.
We talked last time, and in your book you detail about finding the magic in brands, and I thought it was a really good point. And obviously you found that with Tyrrells, you found that with Chase, and they are just darling, gorgeous brands. How are you finding the magic with this? What are the hurdles to finding the magic in terms of making it sexy? You know, I think this whole gut health thing is kind of like having a really good-looking guy or really good-looking woman, but they're dressed like a tramp, and you almost need to like polish them up and make it look presentable to the world and make it look simple. It's almost like the rags are all the complications and stuff. You just need to make it look really simple. Trip have done a great job of this.
Yes.
CBD, I remember walking around, you know, I was going to say NOP, dope. No, it was basically, you know, NOP, natural organics.
I know.
It was basically...
No show, yeah.
Yeah. It was basically it was either people presenting CBD, and again, this is the whole thing of like a good-looking person in raggy clothes.
What's he going to do? Is he going to get you high? Is he going
to get you stoned?
What's
it was
he
like
going to do?
You were seeing all the kind of the pot semiotics and paraphernalia on one hand. The other hand, it was really convoluted in that it looked like a pharmacy lab. What Trip did is they took the beautiful, personal, beautiful product and they put it in beautiful clothes. And now it's a huge whopper brand. And I think this category really interests me, because this is clearly good for you. It's like, how do you make it sexy? You know, with Chase, you literally put the bow tie on the bottles.
Yeah.
The British bow tie, that is a perfect example of making it look sexy, you know? I'd love to know how you'll...
But I think that's probably the $1 million or the $1 billion question.
Yeah.
Is the magic, is the secret sauce. And from my experience, nothing was planned. So whether you've got any of these, whether you watch Dragon's Den or whatever, all of the guys that have made success in life, there's as much luck as there is. It's a lot of hard work, immense amount of hard work, but there's a lot of luck, because I believe there's a lot of people out there that should have done a lot better than they did. They were just at the wrong time in the wrong place. And I think with that one, that's a fantastic point, because I used to call it the magic, but then I think that was probably the wrong expression. So I'd rather refer to it as a secret sauce.
What's the difference between magic and secret sauce?
The secret sauce, to most people, they say, what's the secret sauce? They know what the secret sauce is. The secret sauce is something that works, is something like magic is wizardry, isn't really. But secret sauce, especially in America, there's finding the secret sauce. If you're a trader and you found you can trade and you've got your right stocks and you're working well, that's the secret sauce. So for me, the secret sauce, I didn't plan. And you look at everybody's story. If you look at James Dyson's story, for example, with his secret sauce, his magic, when he discovered it, was the bagless Hoover. But before that, he made a wheelbarrow with a big red bull on the front of it that would go across lawns, and that was going to be his magic, his secret sauce. For me, with Tyrrells, it was going to be like cider vinegar potato chips were our first thing that I thought we're off to the races with this that sold. But then when we did the vegetable chips, that was the secret sauce. That was the magic with Tyrrells. That was the bit that just took it off to the races. That was fantastic. When we built the distillery, I thought vodka, we could make a better quality, pure tasting vodka that would beat sort of Grey Goose, Belvedere, would beat all of the brands. But where I got that wrong was the pedigree and that the people aren't so bothered about, rather than the occasion. But where the magic came
What do you mean the occasion?
Where the magic and the secret sauce with the distillery was the pink grapefruit gin. And when we came up with that, for whatever reason, it just sold. It just went ballistic. It was timing, everything about it. It made that business explode, and it was just that was the secret sauce. And it wasn't planned. My plan to build it, to make the best tasting vodka in the world, and just do that. And then we started making different products. So the secret sauce but the secret sauce now with Willys, I thought just this would be the secret sauce.
Yeah.
And then now we've got this. This just sells itself. So this is my eureka moment now. This is, and it just sells itself. So
yeah, it's almost like creating the brand.
You've got to be in it to win it.
Yeah, but creating the brand is getting in the water.
Is a vehicle.
Yeah. Imagine you're surfing, and Perry talks a lot about the slip. I was on a call with Perry yesterday. Talks a lot about the slipstream.
Yes.
You know, when you're surfing, you get something pulls you out.
Yeah.
He goes, mate, you can either paddle against the water like that, or just go to the slipstream and go right up there. And I always believe we've got a slipstream channel, so you can think of a channel that no one's thinking about and go and play there. There's a Willys Pies, a darling example of this. Yeah. They've gone into football stadiums. Mm-hmm. Fucking huge volume, but no one's really thinking of that. That's their slipstream channel. Yeah. You can also have a slipstream skew, which is something like, you know, the roasted crisps or the pink grapefruit vodka. Yeah. But and almost so these slipstreams are little waves but you have to be in the water. So getting in the water is having a brand and having a business.
You've got your customers. You've got your route to market.
That's being in the water. But then occasionally, if you look out and you're kind of vigilant, a wave will come and it will just push you way further.
Yes.
So the secret sauce with that is the turmeric. How should founders go and look for the secret sauce? Is there a secret to find the secret sauce?
That's a fantastic point, and I think so many people you talk to, nobody finds the secret sauce straight away. They do. There's a few cases where, you know, you can drop into it, but quite often you do something that leads to something else, that leads to something else in life that gets you to finding it. So I think you've got to have your eyes open. But if you're like me and you've got the monkey mind, or you've got ADHD and you're looking for too much and you're making it too complicated, before long, you've got so many balls in the air, you've got so much going on, you don't see the wood for the trees. So there's an immense thing about focus. Another thing is, how long do you give something before you give up on it as well? That's a really, and then how do you make sure you don't push something that you more believe in personally than everybody else believes in. So it's
that's a great point.
It's like this balance.
That's a great point. Where that's founderitis, which Charles Brooke talks about.
Yes.
Where it's the founder gets so wedded to their idea that they're trying to force feed like fucking Farquhar the market their product. It's like, look, mate, we may not like the hyper convoluted thing that you're so proud of. How do you? That's a delicate art and science, I think. Is there an example where you've got that wrong, where you've tried to force feed the consumers a product that you absolutely loved, but they were a bit like, we don't get it, mate?
Yeah, many times.
Any examples?
Yeah, I think probably with the distillery, my personal best product that business made was the marmalade. Was the marmalade vodka? It was just a phenomenal product. It was, but then. It was, so we don't know how to drink it. We bought an Body Shop machine, a vacuum cooker that used to cook these orange peel. We used to make marmalade in it, and we used to get this marmalade into the vodka by vacuum cooking it into there. So it was like boiling a kettle on a mountain. And it was an amazing product, and the audience loved it, but it just never saw it. And they made it into marmalade gin. People didn't know what to do with marmalade orange vodka, but marmalade gin, just mix tonic with it and we'll drink it. And so yeah, I put a lot of effort and a lot of work into that. That was going to be the secret sauce, but then it was going on. But we didn't give up. We had the rhubarb gin that sold okay. That was quite good. It's quite quirky. But then, there's only the pink grapefruit, and for no reason at all. The pink. Everybody said, "Gosh, I love
it pink?"
Yeah, it was a pink liquid, and it was trending. Pink liquids are trending at the time, but it was just the smell and the aromas. And for whatever reason, but this is the reason I'm telling about this now is. Today, I cannot put my finger exactly why that works so well. With Tyrrells, the reason the veg chips work so well, I can't put my finger on it, because even with Tyrrells, we had the government helping us with they said you've got to get 5 a day into children, so we will have Colin the carrot, Percy the parsnip, and this is an amazing idea. But I said, they're deep fat fried, they're not healthy at all. So our job is to get 5 a day into children, so that's all we want to do, is to get all humans to get their basic 5 a day.
I think what you're saying here is a very good point. I think it's a point about luck.
Yeah.
And I think there is a massive luck but I genuinely believe you can create your surface area of luck. The harder you work, the more shit. I'm not saying shit, sorry. Like if you tried marmalade, you tried what was the other one? Marmalade. Obviously, pink grapefruit was
and
the one
rhubarb.
Rhubarb.
It was a big hit. It worked okay, but it didn't. It wasn't a hockey stick.
Yeah. But I think you have to create that surface area of luck
and left the factory empty. Like, look, listen to the Little Moon story. That's phenomenal. How just a TikTok campaign on how they pioneered snacking ice cream, really, and then once all of Notting Hill is having it, and it's off to the champagne classes, it just went ballistic. And
that TikTok,
they went from 1 million to like 20 million in no time at all.
That's a darling example of. I keep saying darling example today. That's an example of how a brand can traverse from champagne problem to CocoPop problem, because that TikTok campaign was getting everyone to go into store. Yeah. It was almost like, because I think it was during COVID, it almost become like an Easter egg hunt of can you find the Little Moons. Absolutely.
And they couldn't keep up with the production, so they were deciding who's rationing the supply to them. So that made it even more in demand. Yeah, fantastic. But no, you plan these things, but it's. And we're all very clever afterwards when it works, but it's how many frogs do you have to kiss, or how many blanks do you have to fire before you actually, how many misses do you have before you actually have a direct hit on something. So, and your point about luck and management, I've come to a conclusion on that now. It's definitely 50-50. So anything in life that's a success, it's 50% luck and 50% management.
What was the management? Let's dig into the management, because that 50% is really important, and that 50% gives you the other 50%, which is luck, which gives you the slipstream channel. What are the principles of management? And I don't necessarily mean like management in the sense of being a manager. I mean in terms of managing a brand, that you think gave you a big blanket of luck to throw across all your different products, which then have this huge success.
I personally would describe that in my life as I've been a busy fool. I think I've done too much and I'd blame that to my ADHD. I think I've done too much prospecting.
Prospecting,
meaning looking for new things, always looking for that something on the horizon. So it was only a couple of years ago when I had that 4 centimetre tumour in my stomach, and I lost some of my gut. That it actually, until that in my life, I was always searching for something that was over the horizon. There was always something better. There was always something, and then when you get that, and then you've got the thing. And it was on my father's funeral day that I was just getting ready for his eulogy, and I took the call that I've got a life-changing operation coming up, and I shouldn't have taken that call that morning, but it's like it changes your perspective. So your perspective on life, how you manage it. So you're reading your father's eulogy. Describe the feeling in your bones that day, because I think it can literally, your life can change in a day, good, bad, or ugly. Describe that. Yeah, it was just that sort of thing that when you've got a life-changing surgery and you're going to, it puts everything into perspective. So
what was the perspective?
All my life I was racing. I don't know what for, but I've been racing for this thing that's on the horizon, and I couldn't put it into words. But there was this thing that I was going for, and it's your imagination, and this is whether you call it the ADHD or the bipolar, however you put it too. It's trying to connect it up to real live living facts, how you can manage your life, whether we talk about phones, use of phones, to our time, to best use of phone, to whether we drink alcohol or ultra-processed foods. It's all related to this, isn't it? Your brain, and how to manage your brain and condition your brain. And we all want to become better and do more, but it's just how we can manage this thing. And I think that's such an amazing topic and conversation. And only smarters have got the answer. Nobody's really got the answer for it.
And I'm kind of going for this now with the podcast, and it's a delicate balance between focus and I actually believe distractions masquerade as opportunities. They go around and you think, oh, this is a nice... Not even shiny toy. Like, I think shiny toy is not the best way of. I think there needs to be a better word for it. But it's like they're genuine opportunities. Like going into new products, new SKUs. With me, it's like, do we set up another podcast? I'm thinking of creating a podcast called The Challenger Chairman. Yeah. With the ex-CEO of Booths, but then is that a distraction? Of doing
you've only got so much time left in that hourglass.
Exactly.
And where are you going to put that time?
Exactly. And also I think you've got to follow your fun is one of my big things. I think the KPI no one talks about in business
is enjoyment. It's fun.
Enjoyment. Like
they say it's not
I was
until
going to
you're
write a thing saying 4 things I've learnt in 4 years of doing a podcast. Yeah. Or everyone at the minute it's in vogue to say the 4 things I learned or the 20 things I learned, or like. And I was going to say number 1, have. Number 2. Basically have lots of fucking fun was the point. And it's like, if you're having fun, you can just glide and ooze and groove through obstacles. I think if you keep that element of fun and playfulness and actually lack of seriousness in what you're doing, you can kind of just groove over things. The also because I think Perry describes it as don't go chasing tennis balls. Yeah. How do you... So you said that before we hit record, you said your biggest mistake, or not biggest mistake, because you still did really well out of it, was selling businesses as the snowball was going or rolling.
I think I've done more for other people, setting other people up, than actually finishing it myself. If I just stuck with it.
Come a bit close to that.
I've done more setting things up, I think, than finishing them.
So let's start.
I've done the hard work, I think, in getting it rolling. Yeah. And it's like in life. If you're young and you're starting out with nothing, you want to get I always referred to it when I remember when I had nothing was I want to get my ball rolling. I want to get started. At the moment we're static. Yeah. And we need to once your ball is rolling, you can gather momentum. Then you can start generating cash and you can operate. But if you're static, you're not going anywhere. So
with Tyrrells, why did you sell it?
I think it was just. It was probably, I could blame that on my ADHD again or something like that maybe, but I think it's just, I think if you feel you have a divine right to do something, you probably think you can go and do it again, which is not always true. So it's.
But you did do it again.
I think I was very lucky as well. I think, and again, it's that 50-50 luck or management. My trouble is I get too involved, and this is the high part of my ADHD or my bipolar. When I'm up there, enough is not enough. And however fast we're going, we want to be going faster. And this is a subject I love, that it's amazing what human beings are capable of if they can get things right, if they can get all their ducks lined up, and as they're just focusing on one tennis ball and they've got their ball rolling. And it's almost like graduating. If you make a business a success, you've done all the hard work. In life, the hardest work is going to school. So you go to school to learn how to do it, and this is like setting the business up. And it's like me selling a business when I've just left university. And if you've got something, when I look at a lot of other guys that have set up great businesses, from whether it's sort of Charlie Bingham's to JCB's to James Dyson, the worst thing they could have ever done is sell those businesses, because they built something so beautiful that they could just keep. And so my problem is not problem, but the way I've done it is to go back to junior school again. And it's not just a financial thing, but it's the physical people. You don't realise how important.
But then what you said to me last time is, when you're in the winner's enclosure, you realise that all the fun is in the race.
Definitely,
so that's the other point.
It's the chase. It's the chase again, isn't it?
Yes, the chase. William Chase. Yeah,
going back to the chase again.
I think that was really profound when you told me that. That's something that stuck with me, because I'm realising that it's just, because people say to me, how are you going to sell a podcast? I'm like, I don't want to. I just want to keep having fun.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to inherit it. You'd want to make it for yourself, because there's nothing better than if you make something for yourself, the self-satisfaction in doing that. And it's like children or people, if they're spoiled, once they're spoiled, once you've had it too easy, you've not got the hunger to go and do it. So it's like your
struggle
hungry
is purpose.
podcast.
Struggle is fulfillment.
Hunger is an amazing word, and whether it's a diet or whether it's business or whatever, to be hungry.
Yeah, and that's why I called it hungry. It's kind of a play on words. But to your point, in terms of the speed and the insatiable desire for more, I kind of have that. I need to temper it down a bit, because it's just. And I suppose the example of this now is like hungry's working like a glove. Like it's taken 4 years, but I've got enough content now till probably March next year. We're recording this in August now, so I've got loads of content lined up. So I'm in that kind of tennis ball syndrome. Like, okay, I want to make some more money here, and I suppose I'm asking you selfishly, and there'll be loads of founders going through this. It's like I'm kind of thinking, am I just fucking distracting myself to the point where it's going to be combustible, or am I being shrewd and actually there is other opportunities out there? And is another podcast my pink gin? Pink grapefruit gin, it's tricky. I don't know really how to.
But you've got to be in it to win it. And if you weren't doing it with a lot of aggression, a lot of drive, and a lot of passion, you will make it win. And it's winning now. It's working for you now. And it's like success breeds success. Yeah. And I think what's good about the way you do it is you're very genuine. You're very sincere. You could start getting funding and getting people to pay you and sponsor it and paying guests to come on. But then you're soliciting for business then. And you're not genuinely, at the moment, you're organically growing. So it's whether you're paying for a community as well. You can keep paying. There's lots of brands today that are growing to 100,000 followers, 200,000 followers, and they're paying to get their friends. But it's not genuine. It's not. You're better off to grow, I think, and have genuine, and talk to all your contacts as friends and treat them on a level, rather than they'll do till somebody better comes along, and then they'll do till somebody better comes along.
Yeah, 100%. And that's my thing, is a small, deep connection with people. Yeah. I really believe in that. And I don't think you need a big... But there's a beautiful book called Small Giants by Bo Burlingham. And it was written in the 90s, but he talks... Obviously now the brand is big, but he talks about the nascent craft beer brands. He talks about the nascent Patagonia. And it's these small, at the time, Patagonia is now bigger, but at the time it was like this really sick business doing really cool, not regenerative, that's in my head.
Good word.
Yeah. I'll have that tattooed on me. But I think you can build small, beautiful businesses, and I think there's actually a curse of maniacal obsession with growth.
Yeah.
Which is, I suppose, you've been somewhat culprit to, because you wanted to flip Tyrrells and then go on to. But when you said you made other people successful, how so?
Well, they've enjoyed the spoils of, because just to get that ball rolling from static is a far bigger job than ever. There's thousands of managing directors, and people will come in and run businesses once they're up and running. Whether they do a very good job of it, it was like with Tyrrells at one point. One bunch had it, and was the CEO of that said, "I think my 10-year-old son could have done a better job of managing it than the way we have." So it's there are horses for courses, but it's a lot easier managing something once it's going than it is. But then is it investable as well? That's the other thing. It's like we're in this fast-moving move today with sort of crowdfunding and different ways of VCs and funding businesses to get going. And everybody's thinking of backing. It was almost like years ago, there was a thing called the 3 I's. And when the 3 I's were investing, they just invest in many, many companies.
What 3 I's?
The 3 I's were an investment group on sort of early days of VCs and sort of investment companies outside banks, private and it's sort of, it's quite interesting what works. If you shoot enough shots in the dark, hopefully you're gonna get a hit. So it's like investing. People invest in something just because it's on the way up. It was like a good example was Fever Tree. If you take, we started the Distillery. We're in a museum in London. We were there with Tim and Charles from Fever Tree. They said, we're really struggling with this tonic. It's we're going to make ginger beer. So they had a big jug of ginger beer, and then the gin boom happened, and they got everything. They did an amazing job with premiumizing tonic, and the rest is history. So that's where I think finding the magic or the eureka moment is so pivotal.
It's almost a full circle. Momentum equals magic. Magic equals momentum.
Yes.
You have to, as you say, if you just grind your way into some momentum, which is you just grafting with Tyrrells, you'll find some magic, which is the vegetable crisps. Yeah. That magic feeds more momentum. So you're on this magic momentum kind of cycle, but you need the momentum to create the magic, and then the magic will get that thing snowballing. I am absolutely over the bloody moon that Big Fish, yes, Big Fish, the big dons of Challenger Food and Drink brand design. I mean, Perry is an absolute legend. He's designed every Challenger brand in your cupboard. Charlie Bigham's, Goo, Tyrrells, Rana, Clipper Tea. The list is endless. And Big Fish are looking to speak to the next wave of Challenger Food and Drink brands who are a force for good. They're looking to invest in brands, and we've got this sick thing coming next year that you do not want to miss out on. If you want to speak to Big Fish, if you want to go to the Fish Bowl, drop me a DM and I can make it happen. North Star, get listed, say listed, and grow. Do you actually know your shopper? If you don't know your shopper, you're literally pissing and spunking money up the wall. Knowing your shopper is the secret weapon to unlock more grocery listings and more stores. But not knowing your shopper is literally like driving in the dark, hungover, without a sat-nav, in a thunderstorm, in February with 5 miles of petrol in the tank. But knowing your shopper is like having a sat-nav. A full tank of petrol is a glorious sunny day. You're listening to the Sugar Babes and you've got a fresh, hot, pumpkin spice latte by your side. North Star Illuminator is the shopper map to the promised land of growth and success. It does 3 wonderful things for your brand. 1, make your marketing budget sweat. When you've got lucid, crystal clarity on exactly where each precious penny is going, you know how to drive loyalty with existing customers or even bring new shoppers into your brand. Numero 2, what's actually driving performance? Do you actually know why your sales are going up and down? You need to know, are you bringing new shoppers into the category? Is that driving growth? Are loyal customers buying more of your brand? Are shoppers switching in and out of your brand versus other brands? I mean, Perfect Head's a glorious example. They are bringing new shoppers into sports and energy. They are so incremental versus, say, chocolate bars, where people just switch in and out of brands all the time. The more you know this, the more oomph you've got with your buyer when you go to do a marketing plan, a joint business plan with retailers. The buyers want to know how incremental you are to the category. That is your passport to success. North Star is your passport. And what you can do is you can literally see it by channel, by retailer, get so specific. If you're looking to go to the next level, honestly, get in touch with North Star and go to the promised land. MKJ Ignite are a team of experienced recruiters who specialize in the challenger brand space. They recruit for over 50 brands, ranging from pre-revenue startups right through to some award-winning brands such as Real Superfoods and Purdy and Fig. They recruit across all levels and all functions, so whether you're looking for a new salesperson, a new marketing whiz, or an ops guru, MKJ Ignite have got you covered. They're bloody good at what they do, trust me. So if you're looking to hire or you're looking for a new role, get in touch with MKJ Ignite. They won't let you down. Are you looking to turbocharge your brand, take it to another level, save money, save energy, save stress, save time? Well, I've got the perfect thing for you. I am delighted to announce that HC Brands, formerly HC Consulting, my boy Harry Clark, has just launched a commercial growth accelerator program designed specifically for challenger food and drink brands. You can upskill your commercial team. They've got so many modules, you can handpick them, where you can do the full shebang. You're going to save hours of research. You're going to get the tools to turbocharge your growth, get better clarity on your brand's objectives and directions. And look, Harry's worked with some amazing brands, Holy Moly, Islands, Savile, and Rooted Drinks. He's really helped me with a strategy for Hungary. Yeah, if you're looking to turbocharge your brand, link in the show notes, and you're going to be able to do that easy peasy, lemon squeezy. And I get asked this a lot, so from listeners, is how do you actually sell a business? Because a lot of people listen to this podcast and they're like, well, that is the end goal. That's the shiny goal at the end of the rainbow. But like, what do you do? So you get the business. How big did you get Tyrrells? Was it 20 million or what was the retail?
No, we did about 15 million. 15
million.
And it was netting a 5 million profit, net profit, not a EBIT, but a net profit of 5 million.
Yeah.
So it was, that's
a bloody healthy business then, yeah.
It was a founder led, so everything was kept extremely tight, all the costs and everything. There were no luxuries, there was no expensive salaries in there. Everything was kept to a very tight.
And that's almost the management part we were talking about earlier.
It is. It's a startup. You look at a lot of people don't want to go and work for startups because they don't want the pain of having. There's no luxuries. I've had lots of people with Tyrrells and with the Distillery coming in. They say, well, when I was managers, when I was a so-and-so, I had 12 people under me. Now, if somebody doesn't come to work, I've got to go and do the job myself.
Well, it's also linking this to gut health or health, is your challenger brand can get fat and sick by, almost nefarious, cancerous, egotistical employees are kind of like your sugar. Meetings about meetings is cocaine.
Exactly, and you can't afford those as startups.
You can't afford those things, yeah. And you had it really lean.
Yeah.
It had it 5 million.
But
net
I wasn't intending to sell it.
So why did you sell it?
It wasn't built to sell.
So why did you sell it?
Oh, good question. I just thought I could probably do better in something else. I heard about Sidney Frank. I'd met Sidney Frank selling. He built Grey Goose, and he built it with basically nothing, but he sold it 6 years later for 2 billion. I thought, wow, that's exciting if you can premiumize that category. So it's different categories. So it's like fishing in the ponds.
What do you mean by fishing in the ponds?
Well, it's which area you're fishing in. So that's why it was a lot more attractive to be in super premium spirit brands. They're worth a lot more if you did want to sell something than a snack business frying chips and making, everyday chips. So it's like what area are you going to go and fish in? You've got this choice. If you're going to build a brand or build a business, you have all of your different places on the river you can go fishing in, and you've got to go. You could decide where you go somewhere because you like being there, or you're going to go somewhere because your knowledge and you know where the fish are and how to do it. So it's.
I suppose the issue in your mind is you've probably got 100 ponds you're trying to fish in.
And exactly. And I was a different person, and I was thinking about what success.
How old were you when you sold it?
I was 40 when I sold.
40.
Yeah.
And then so you get this? You have this £20 million business, 5 million net profit, lean team. Who do you call? Who do you get into the meeting room? Like, what's the structure of the deal?
If you've got something that good, you don't need to sell it. You've got people over you. I used to have letters from Saudi Arabia, from Arab. I used to have all sorts. Tyrrells had all sorts of people all over it. Wanting to buy it. If you've got something good, people will soon find you.
Yeah, it's the whole "be so good they can't ignore you."
It is. Yeah. If it's good, if it's sexy and it's looking good, you soon got.
What does it feel like when that money lands in your bank account? Is it a good feeling, bad feeling? Ambivalent feeling.
Yeah, it's back to that. It's only when you're in the winners' enclosure you realise the fun was in the race. You realise what you had. So it's almost part of the. It's almost part of a test to see if I can beat that and do it again. But as you're getting older, you're getting time's not going on your side. There's a thing in a human being's life where I think experience is worth more than money. When things went really badly for me in life and I thought I'd lost everything, I hadn't lost everything because I had the education I had learnt in the first 10 years in business of being totally beaten and trying to make it work. And
there's vital lessons in the scars, I think. What are some of the other big scars in business and or life that have actually retrospectively provided valuable lessons. I was listening somewhere to, I think people were saying like, if any sort of painful experience or any sort of setback or obstacle, it's like when they got through that obstacle, they were asked, we could give the option, we take that obstacle away, or you can just they're like, we'll keep the obstacle because of the lessons it taught us. What are some of the big scars or deep scars? I think the deeper the scar, the deeper the lesson that you've kind of had on the journey.
I think the one thing you've got to remember is no regrets. If you're still alive today, and I would have been, my change in myself where I am now, I'd have been totally different if I'd have got lots of answers for you probably a year ago or a couple of years ago. But now I think we're lucky to be alive. And I think, again, it's like managing that monkey mind and managing your mind and being where you want to be personally. And I think creating a brand, bringing it alive, some people are quite arrogant with it. They think they have a divine right, and I could probably be a little bit arrogant.
When you say divine right, like detail that a bit more.
Well, if you do something and it's a success,
yeah,
you think it's all your, you do, and we need that confidence, because it's like the first to name a few not to name a few schools, but to breed prime ministers, you almost need to have a divine right in life to be a prime minister. So you can always speak above everybody. You always carry that divine right. You can't be a subservient and ask people, is there two ways we can do this? You've got to say, no, this is how we're doing it, and this is how we're going. So I think that's the same for building a brand. And so it's like you've got to be so focused on, and give no doubt to everybody that's going to, because what you don't realise is everybody's looking at you for direction, and you can't say today we're going right and tomorrow we're going left. It's
you almost need, again, that 50-50 split in terms of management and luck. I think you need a 50-50 split between kind of blind, brash, oblivion, boldness in what you're doing and your divine right of where you're going.
Yes.
50, probably 70%. But I think stoicism, balancing that out is a really good way to temper that out, and almost say, the Stoics will talk about focusing on what's in your control. And I'm listening to a Stoic author called Ryan Holiday. Have you ever read his books? The Obstacle's the Way, really good.
Yeah.
But he talks a lot about, his success. It's like, I did want to be the author. I knew exactly what I was trying to do. But actually, there was a lot of luck involved. And I think that's a nice, nuanced middle ground to operate from versus... Because if you have the divine right, the egoism will just kind of engulf you and swallow you,
As it does.
Yeah, yes. As it does. You just start thinking you're the absolute golden tits.
Exactly. And then if you're too humble, you're too weak with it, you get trampled anyway. You don't get above it. So there is a really fine line between that balance.
I read somewhere you had a bit of beef with Philip Green.
Yeah, it was just I entered this competition, this entrepreneurs competition, and I think it was something like 5 million interest free, and the wonderful opportunity of having a whole week being mentored by Philip Green. And it was...
and what period was this?
Just around the time I sold Tyrrells, I think probably 2008, 9.
Yeah.
And but it was quite an interesting experience in the fact that we didn't sort of hit it off together, but I think... So
you won this experience.
I didn't win the experience. I was one of the 5 runners-ups, but when we went to the final interview, it didn't sort of go very well.
What happened?
But it was a little bit... we got a little bit of sort of bravado into that, and so yeah, it's sort of this divine, going back to the divine right.
What happened in the interview though specifically?
I just think it was like nothing to be nothing out of the norm. It's a bit like the whole sort of Dragon's Den, where you've got people with a divine right to and there are no rules. What I love in this, there are rules, but there's no
playbook.
Yeah, exactly. There aren't any. There aren't any rules in life. There are laws. We all have laws we've got to abide by, but there aren't rules. And I think a lot of people think that there are rules, and it's again, it's back to that 50% luck and 50% management. And I think and so many people do it in so many different ways. Some people are exceptionally lucky, and some not so lucky on timing. But I do think there was an interesting conversation today talking about how, you could go as far as say, are people born or are they made? Or are they made because of circumstances of where they went to school and, how they lived their life, how they've been. And back to this thing that we all want to be better and we want to improve, but we are what we are, and it's how we sort of work this. And every time talking about things like this, that's how I go back to Bhutan, and that's a great way to go and see how society would be if we didn't have the cash and we didn't have this big,
neoliberalism,
yes,
kind of
exactly.
the desire for more and more and more. So you guys just didn't hit it off, and then, but did you?
No, you're not going to leave that one alone, are you? That was, yeah, it was just.
I just think it's interesting.
It was just he was, he is what he is, and he's. Yeah, I just think it's an attitude where. It's like respect, how we talk to people.
Because this is the thing.
And so I think however successful you get, you never get the right to be, to demand respect of other people. We all earn respect. And I think there's some great entrepreneurs out there that have done some amazing things. And I think if you can do something in society where it's like take somebody like Timpson's or something like that. You've got some amazing entrepreneurs out there who've done some phenomenal things and put so much back into society. And it's the way they go about things. So it's self-publicising.
Yeah, the reason I was digging in on that one is because I think, and it's a bit like when you stood up to Tesco, back in the day. And I think half this challenger brand thing, a lot of it started with you having the cojones to go and tell Tesco to fuck off, basically, for selling your product. And actually that gave retailers, there are challenger brands out there. Because, as the word challenger, I was speaking to Mark Palmer about this, the word challenger brand didn't exist 20 years ago.
No.
It was just, you set up a business, you set up a food and drink business, whereas now it's all in the vogue to be, I always believe that kind of back in the 80s, it was cool to go into advertising, then it was cool, when leaving university, it was cool to go into banking and make a shitload of wonga, and now it's like set up a food and drink brand, that's the cool thing to do, but back then it wasn't. But my point with the Philip Green thing is, I think brands can think both the divine right piece, so they can think, and it's again very nuanced. It's like, brands can think we're so small, we're just going to let a big investor or a big retailer bully us on the one hand, which is nefarious. Yeah. The other hand is, it's my divine right, you need to list this product, almost again force feeding foie gras down the buyer's throat. That's nefarious. So I'm just trying to pull out and detail
I think with the Tesco incident, it was just at the time. That's where retailers were. It's a different matter now. Yeah. How there's a different respect for farmers and producers. But at that point, that was probably the pinnacle of the food revolution since the 40s, 50s. Supermarkets did an awful lot to clean food up. It was in a bit of a state in the sort of 50s and 60s. There was no standards for farmers. Anything could be put into, but it was probably healthier food. But it was, to this thing where, but then they sort of almost took it too far then, where it was this thing to provide volume, again, of in nutritionally poor foods, but just being paid for volume. You had to get volume, and there was almost this race to produce volumes of food, and that's why I keep coming back to the regenerative thing, because it's almost like going back to the Bhutan thing. If we were eating or living like they did 100 years ago, like they do in Bhutan, the society would be a lot better. So now we've got everybody now with this, being mentally aware of what's going on, and we've got this new. But are we going to give up the Coco Pops, and are we going to give up Coco Pops and sort of things like McDonald's, and are we going to have this insatiable desire for cheap, ready-made, on-the-go foods, or are people going to change their attitude? And all this comes down to the food we eat, and the food is probably the most, as you said, having a food and drink brand that has got a respect is quite amazing. It's quite an amazing product, because the food we eat is the most important thing. You could have all sorts of different brands doing different things, but if you can sell wellness, if you can get a brand to actually help people understand something, I think that's making a difference. Then that's
one of my obsessions at the minute, out of many, is actually Napoleon. And I was reading, I've listened to quite a lot of podcasts about him, and a lot of Steve Jobs was obsessed with him. There's a lot of entrepreneurs who actually read a lot of Napoleon, and I imagine kind of you almost, if we're putting this in the olden days, like marching on horse to the Tesco head office and sort of saying your point. But he's got some really interesting maxims from this book called The Mind of Napoleon that I'd love to explore with you. So he's got one which is: a genius is the man who can do the average thing when everyone else around him is losing his mind. And I think back to that management luck point. Yeah. A lot of genius is doing the average thing when there's fucking chaos going on. What would you say is an example of that in either Tyrrells or Willys or Chase Distillery?
I would say, and to take it from Napoleon, it's just got to be focus, isn't it? It's got to be any great leaders that have had success. It's having that focus to execute the plan, to take the plan, and to get. So I think the one thing Napoleon did so well was strategy, and as a strategist and the people around him, he really did get a great bunch around him that to execute that plan, to be basically be taken seriously, wasn't it? It worked. His plan worked. He was a great strategist. So it's back to that strategy, but a very simple strategy as well.
So what was the strategy? How did you, because again, strategy can be convoluted, and strategy, like our health, can get fat,
yes,
and unhealthy where people add in loads of bollocks into it. How did you, like Napoleon, simplify your strategy? And maybe you can talk about Chase Distillery for that.
I think you've got to find what works. There's no divine right. Whatever you're going to do in life, there's no guarantee what it's going to work. When you start doing something, you don't know what the outcome's going to be.
Yeah.
It's we can easy to see afterwards, but when you start, you don't know where you're going to be. So it's learning on the go. It's not stop learning. I find myself now, I've even got to learn even faster now than I have in the rest of my life to sort of. What this is all about is wasting time fishing where the fish aren't, isn't it? We all want to be where the fish are, and we want to be sustainably fishing as well. We don't want to just, have a quick flip. We want to keep it going. So it's sustainably working it, and strategy, focus, and strategy, and following that, as you said earlier, not getting too wrapped up with the romance, keeping the romance out of it, and keeping an eye on. I think you can never do too much for your customers. If you're manufacturing, making a product, and your customers, you can never do too much for your customers.
What do you mean by never do too much for your customers?
Well, look after all your customers. Every customer is a customer.
You say customer or consumer?
All of them. Whoever's paying you money for your brand or your product, you can never do too much of them.
What's the special sauce or magic to doing that? To like that? I know the trite, crass way of saying it.
Listen to your customer.
Yeah.
And see what they want, and get in the trenches. Get out there. Get out on the face, and see what they want. It's like if I'm going to another country now, take my brand to another country, I wouldn't just ring up distributors and send the stuff out there. I'd want to do a trade show. I'd want to go out there myself, and go and. We've got even the government here supports. Ever since I started Tyrrells, I spent all my time going around the world, subsidised by the government, to go and meet people. And all the time you're learning. You're learning all the time what customers want, what works. And probably for things like exporting your brand, you think that everybody's like us, but they're not. Everybody's different. They all want different things. All our customers are different. So,
what are some of the interesting, surprising nuances you found across different countries? Because one of my fascinations is, like, on a deeper level, just different cultures. Back to our Japan point, I love, like, the Japanese hospital food versus English hospital food versus American hospital food. It's hospital food, but we're all wildly different. Like, what are some of the countries you've gone to and you've been like, fuck, that's crazy?
Yeah, I think probably the best example is when I took sort of Tyrrells around the world, and the one place I thought first of all was France, and I thought things like we're making these parsnips and Parmesan crisps, so we're making these, which I thought would have sold really well in France, and they didn't go, they bombed. And then I found out the parsnips are like a pig food there's no respect for them, they don't want them. So it's you have to be in it. So my point is here.
Be in it. That's such a good point. Be in the trenches.
And so you have to get out there, get with your customers. It's like the most important thing for me in this business are anything at all. And what I love about dealing with independent retailers, they don't talk about money, they just talk about your product. So the most important customers for me are independence, is looking after where your roots, where you come from. And like national accounts, big customers just want to buy it for money and volumes, and they just want stats and cash. But small little independents, their lives depend on it. So they'll sell products they love and they buy into. So your customers, or even if it's D2C is a massive thing now. If you can get your D2C right and get subscribers, first of all, like to describe, you want people to describe, to let you in, to let you tell their story. But the second thing is then if you can get subscribers to pay to buy your story physically, your product, and your product is important in their life where they need it regularly every month, then that's the secret to success. That is the secret sauce. So I just think customer service, you can never ever do too much, and that's always been my biggest trouble with sales and marketing and building a brand, is trying to get everybody into that ethos that you can never do too much for your... One thing that really annoys me now at the moment is you go on websites where you suddenly want to buy something, you can't just pick up the phone and ring them. There are so many companies now that just don't want you to... I was listening to this podcast the other day on digital marketing and the biggest mistake everybody makes is they make these lovely adverts and that, but they don't want anybody to come back to them with, it's a reaction for an investment. You want a reaction. If you're going to send you don't just want to put a podcast out and get nothing back. You want a criticism. You want, whether it's good criticism, bad criticism, but we all need criticism and testimonials, and that to me is the excitement. I want people to ring us and tell us what the product does for it, if we can make it better, if we can do anything differently, and that's where I think it all comes from.
I think the word "be in it" is really important now, because that "be in it" is the link between the management and the luck. When you're being in it, when you're being in the trenches, when you're walking, is it Sam Walton who did Walmart, walk the floor? Yes, is the famous thing. He's like, he is being in it, and he's been able to like put his sort of hands into all the kind of the different pockets to really extract out as much information as possible. And I think it's so easy to get distracted and kind of think, as you get bigger, my role is not to go and be in the trenches per se. The other thing that Napoleon did very well was he talked about the flex of strategy,
because he was in it. He was there at the front line. He was there with it. He knew.
Because I've only literally got into why was Napoleon so important?
Well, he just knew everything was going on. He was in it, wasn't he? He was there. He had his finger on the pulse. He was, and I think that's where it was at the final battle, wasn't it? It was quite interesting how it's all about tactics, wasn't it? All about tactics and strategy and how to judge that the other people. So if you're building a brand, it's the market and where everybody else is in the market, and it's always never be jealous. That was one of Bill Gates' big sayings, wasn't it? It's never be jealous of the competition. And that's probably one thing that a lot of brands and a lot of people get quite jealous. I agree with that as well.
What do you mean by never be jealous of the competition?
Well, never be looking at the competition all the time and seeing what they're doing and being jealous of them. You've got to be only be jealous of them probably if they're doing something that you're not, but you should be doing things that they're not.
You do you.
I think that summary of that was, I did a thing in China once, and it was about registering brands. And in China, you're not allowed to register a brand for at least 5 years before you've been up and running. And these Chinese guys I was talking to, they said it's a good thing because it makes us improve. We love people copying our goods because then next year it makes us make it better all the time. So they're always going up a scale. So I think you can always make it better. You know, if you've got your Formula One car out and you've won a race, you don't just stop. You've constantly got to make that car better and better and more efficient. And with a brand, it's got to constantly evolve, and give its customers all the best brands that work. Then they're restless. If you look at anything, and probably Apple would be at the top of this for innovation and being.
Well, but look how much they've stagnated post Steve Jobs dying, because they've lost the Napoleon.
Yeah, but they didn't like him because the corporates thought he was too crazy. He was probably they'd put him in the crazy box.
Yeah.
And then the best part about the Steve Jobs story I like was the fact that he used to paint all the inside of the computers different colours.
Yeah.
And that's the bit they really used to despair on, wasn't it? Because it was just for the engineers. So when the engineers took one to bits, There's always a yellow one or it's a green one. Or
it was the inside. But I think that point's very clever from a being in its perspective and the leadership is it's how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And I think it's a signal of perfection and building that culture. Yeah. But I also think I actually think the best lesson for brand builders is actually just to go and listen to the Beatles discography or whatever the fuck, like all their albums, and you just see how they evolve. Mm-hmm. And it's still, they keep their brand DNA, they keep the Beatles, it's still John Lennon and McCarthy. But, if you look at like, obviously you've got the early kind of happy clappy stuff. Then it gets really kind of crazy when they start taking all the acid and shit like that, and but it evolves. And I think that's in terms of brands. The brands need to start, but it needs to constantly be restless and evolving.
Exactly.
And so many bands, just the ones that die are the ones that don't evolve.
Exactly. So probably one of the best examples would be something like Peugeot. And if you asked anybody today what's a Peugeot, they say it's a car. And it wasn't a car. It started out as a lady's corset or something, wasn't it? Or as
really?
They used to make corsets or something. Apparently, I don't know which came first, the corsets or the bicycles. But then they made Peugeot bikes apparently for a long time. But the most famous thing Peugeots have made over the years are the Peugeot salt and pepper grinders.
So Peugeot do salt and pepper grinders?
They do, and they have done. So most kitchens and most really. The taste is that if you've got a Peugeot salt and pepper grinder, and they made so many, they made millions of them. But it's an interesting thing with a brand, how from bicycles to corsets to cars, how that brand's evolved. And so if you'd ask most people what they make today, to other brands like Tabasco, that's a fantastic brand, how they own the hot sauce market globally. And they haven't done a great deal of innovation, but they've just done constant fine tuning of enough things. So, and if you think of other brands, there's the short race and the long race, and that's why I thought with this business it'd be great to build a brand that could have 100-year. You've got to have a 100-year business plan. I think if you've got a 100-year business plan, then you've got something that's sustainable. It's not a fad. And the beautiful thing about this is it's been around for thousands of years before. So you're not actually, you haven't got a new potion that is scientifically proven or whatever, there's nothing like something that's been around since, was back to Hippocrates' time, wasn't it, with vinegars? And he said, let food be thy medicine. And it was, it's how food's evolved since then.
You're saying right now you're like kind of in crazy learning mode. Like what's your burning curiosity? Like where's that pulling you to? Is that into like what are you learning at the minute? Because I think it's interesting.
The whole gut to mental, the whole gut.
Yeah. So tell me, because imagine I am basically a dumb 3-year-old. I don't know much about it.
but it was as that wonderful woman said, we are what we eat.
Yeah.
And that's a fact.
But so say I start necking that. Probably not all in one hit, but what's that doing to me to make my mental health better?
The first thing, it's your whole body digestion. It's with a brand isn't just a product. It's the knowledge that it gives you as well. So it's everything that follows that goes with it. But it's the most important thing is your digestion, your pH. The pH is something people have hardly spoken about. As a farmer, soil. This is why I love the whole sort of regenerative farming now. It's caring for the soil. So that the soil microbiome to the gut microbiome, it's so close.
What's the microbiome?
So your microbiome is all your microbes in the soil, how they get from the soil into your gut through the food. So if we've had lots of things from pasteurizing to many different ways of treating food, probably even from freezing's okay, it's helped, but there's nothing like fresh microbes. And if you listen to Tim Spector or anybody talking about this, it's those microbes, and it's your gut microbes in your gut. There's far more good bacteria than bad bacteria. A lot of people think the bacteria is all bad and it's all the Dettol babies and they don't understand that the majority of your body is made up of good bacteria. And the bad bacteria only feeds off things like ultra-processed sugar and things. So if you keep the ultra-processed sugar and the sweeteners and all the bad things out and the alcohol, your good bacteria will reign. And your good bacteria is your mental wellness. So it's the simple things that I think we've lost. Things like your pH, it's your balance.
Now, what does the pH do?
It's
to
whether
your
people
health?
get heartburn or different. Your pH is just like it's just like a line. If you're a farmer with your soil, you have to have your pH. It mustn't be too acid and it mustn't be too alkaline. And it's the same with your body. If you go eating too much ultra processed and bad foods, you're gonna knock your pH out. So.
Didn't you meet? I saw on your Instagram you met Tim Spector.
Yeah.
Did you go on like one of his courses or something like that?
Yeah, I met him a few times. And
What's he like?
Yeah, I think he's done an amazing job to put simply gut health at the top. Just like eating 30 different plants every week, eating the rainbow, eating fermented foods, cutting out the sugar. All the basics I think he's probably done more for awareness than anybody has in a long time.
It's really. I interviewed. Do you know who Seth Godin is, the marketeer? He wrote Purple Cow.
Yeah.
He came on the podcast and he said any idea spreads through status, affiliation, connection, and fear. If you want an idea to spread, it's one of those three things. So gut health, linking this to a champagne problem at the minute, is you have a lot of status if you're into your gut health. And I think that if you get enough influencers, or not necessarily influencers in terms of Instagram, but enough, like if Leonardo DiCaprio stops being in DC-10 in Ibiza and starts taking care of his gut health, you have these aspirational things. So there's the status element. But then Seth also talks about how simple stories spread ideas. Like the story has to be super simple. And you know what I was saying? Like, how do we kind of package this beautiful thing in sexy clothing? Is it's like we need a simple story that can just spread. So like the 30 fruits and veg, the rainbow. I think Tim's doing a wonderful job of making that story easy to spread, which goes from champagne to Coco Pops.
So it's that education. So we've all got the basics. We know that some of the three basic things are oil. You have good quality oil. You have olive oil. You have salt, good quality salt. And you have good quality acid. But then people are now just learning about things like antioxidants. Nobody's interested in nutrition and antioxidants in the last 20, 30 years. But now people are beginning to think about nutrition. So nutrition-dense foods, the first thing you start talking about is antioxidants. So like turmeric is probably one of your best antioxidants. So it's to build your... Especially after coming through COVID, we had a big word all through COVID was immunity. Everybody was all looking for immunity to be immune. Then you move on to different words, from sustainable to, you know what I mean? We have all these trending words that are going round at the time in humans. So for me, it's something that it's not just a product, but it can educate. It's like beetroots. We make those beetroot shots. They're really popular. They go through phases. But for sports, for athletics, and for antioxidants, a beetroot is quite an amazing product. But it's quite underestimated product. So it's quite a polar product. You either like the taste or you don't. But there's so much to learn about it. So it's to put it in a simple format. Again, nutrient dense, rich foods. It's like apples. Modern apples have nothing in them at all. But old-fashioned apples like Cox's and Bramley's and all these old apples we used to have got really high antioxidants in them. So, and those are the bits. The high antioxidant foods taste quite bitter. It's not easy to have, and as we were saying, things like with turmeric, say in India, they didn't have hot chocolate. Kids when they went to bed, they'd have golden milk, which they call it, which is turmeric mixed with milk. So they probably would have lived quite a healthy life, and they discovered that you've got to have black pepper with it to get it to absorb into your blood. But it's like the education process without becoming boring and keeping it exciting, and your health is your wealth, isn't it? I think and we're finding probably we want to get into more of a younger audience to get them aware, and people are. It's amazing how many young people today are following these lines and are looking for it.
Oh, it's mad. The amount of, Rory is telling me this, the amount of people who Gen Z, I mean, again, I don't like to box people into things, into age groups, so I think it's everyone's moving towards this. But people are, as I said, that kind of that adjacent possible thing is way more people are drinking less and being more mindful of what they're consuming.
Yeah.
What is your... right at the beginning we said your brand has to be a best friend, has to have a best friend. I think that's a great way of putting it. It's like you need to know who your consumer is, and your consumer can't be everyone. You can't be best friends with everyone. No. As you say, for example, Trip is quite clearly their best friend. If I was to create an avatar of this, would be sort of mums and dads, Notting Hill, kind of go to Ibiza. They probably call it Ibiza, not Ibiza. Those are the sort of people. Versus, say, a Liquid Death, which is trying to be like a punk rock. They're quite clearly different best friends.
Yeah.
Who would you say, in terms of creating that connection with that consumer, you say it's all about customer service, who was your best friend at Tyrrells? Who was your best friend at Chase Distillery? And then now, and I think this will tee us nicely to the last bit, is who are you trying to be best friends with Willys?
And again, that's being in it to find out who your audience is.
Yeah.
So
who was the original? Yeah, with Tyrrells, who was
I'd say with all three brands, it would be the same audience. We've spoken to the same audience all the way through, and the same audience would actually, first thing they would actually, they're seeking brands or they're seeking something for the information. They actually buy the story. So there's lots of fake brands that pop up that are just go straight from 0 to 60 in no time, because take Innocent Smoothies would be a good example. Just by nobody really pushed the smoothie market in volume. I don't know how healthy it was with the amount of sugar in them, but it did work. They went just straight to market, taking the Ben and Jerry's model. And what's
the Ben and Jerry's model?
If you read the Ben and Jerry's book, it's like they did this thing in the park, didn't they, with their ice cream? They made some ice cream, and they said, "Shall we start an ice cream business making ice cream?" And it did a fantastic job of making ice cream quite cool. It was like Haagen-Dazs before, and it was all very serious and very. Yeah. And then Ben and Jerry's put out.
They were like the OG Challenger brands.
Yeah, exactly. And they put a colourful, happy style about it. It's the same with Innocent. When they did that, that was putting around smooth, instead of being white label supermarket owned sort of, or very boring. They made it quite approachable, quite soft, and quite more. So there's many ways of doing it, and it's finding your audience. And I think, because probably for one of my handicaps is I've always wanted to build a factory and get the farm into it as well, which I did vow after the last one I wouldn't build another factory, and here I built another factory again. And if you look at a good model like, say, Red Bull, they never put a penny into production, or every penny has gone into sales and marketing totally, and that's amazing. It's probably one of the most valuable brands on the. But all that cash has just gone into sales and marketing, 100%. So, but I think with this product, I couldn't have outsourced. There's no way I could have outsourced it. So to get the story behind it, that's what we've had to make it. Does it help? It's almost.
So that factory is your marketing as well.
It is, yeah. But to a lot of people, they say it's a distraction. That it's an investment in. At the top of the pyramid, it's very important to the top of the pyramid. So if you look at, say, take Tyrrells in its journey, at the very early days, say for the first 5-10 years, it was very important that it stayed at the top of the pyramid. So like its pricing and things, and the reason Tesco's wanted it is they said, we'll list it if you've got to drop the price down to Walker's Sensations and Kettle Chips price. We said, no, it's 30% more, and that's why Waitrose and those guys are selling them, because they're making more money and they believe the brand. They know it's from the farm. They got the pedigree, and they're paying for that.
So that's the other thing is again champagne to CocoPop. So
yeah, exactly.
The theme of this is how half the issue, a big barrier as well as the education, is price.
Yeah.
How do we get to a point, or how do you, if your big vision is to get people, to help lots of people, and I think it is a very noble and admirable thing for people who are creating brands, genuine brands. A lot of those kombucha brands are cat piss, to be honest. Not my friends' ones who have probably seen, but like my friends have got the real deal. But there's some of the bigger companies that's basically just polishing a turd, putting cat piss in a bottle and making it effervescent. But how do you deal with the price? Like, do you get to enough volume whereby
you can make it more. It's value.
Did you have that with Tyrrells? Did you start super high on the premium side, and then as the volume...
I think there was a thing in the Express, and they said it's the world's most expensive crisp. The vegetable parmesan ones were something like 35 pence a crisp. So the Express did a thing on Tyrrells
per crisp.
That they had an article in the Express, and they said a single Tyrrells parsnip crisp was more expensive than a small packet of Walker's crisp.
So how much was that retailing for?
They were like a couple of pounds a packet, but they were quite hard work. They were handmade, fried parsnips and beetroots, and they were really hard to make. So it's back to that.
I haven't had vegetable crisps in ages.
Economies of scale.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think it's a really valuable point. That is how you have to get your value by scale. So my objective still is to get a bottle of this into every single kitchen I can, and to do that, it has to be value. It has to give people value. They have to understand the value versus what it's giving them, the quality of product that's inside it. So, and there's lots of greenwashing. There's lots of quick fixes, but there are ways that you can, as the volume goes up, you obviously do dilute your overheads, and as long as you genuinely do that and share that with your customer. You know, obviously, when you're just making 10 bottles a week by hand, it's going to cost you an awful lot more. You know, it's like when we had Tyrrells, we were making a packet of crisps used to cost us something like 30, 40 pence a packet to make a big packet. Whereas Walkers and, you know, these other guys, Frito-Lays, they were knocking them out for about 5 and 6 pence a packet. So it's your cost of it, but it's not just the cost of the goods, it's your cost of overheads. So if you're running a business on your own in a borrowed somebody else's premises or something, and you've got your overheads in your garage and you've got your overheads right down, but it's then suddenly when it starts to grow,
that's another a lot of today is balance, right? Is balancing two opposing things, and I think that is kind of the being in it. That is what makes a real formidable founder is being able to balance two opposing things and being in the mixer. So high RRP to begin with. You don't have economies of scale at Tyrrells. Then, as you said, be wary of the overheads.
Mm-hmm.
What did your margins look like from, say, when you went into Waitrose early days to like by the end?
That's an interesting one, because you have a tail, and in a small startup you have two tails. One thing is lots of products, and another thing is lots of customers. So when the corporates come in, when people want to take it to scale, they haven't got time for your small customers who only want to buy a couple of boxes. They're more after people who want 24 pallets, they want Arctic loads, they want to take the stuff. So it's that balance of growing a brand to looking after all your small customers where you came from, I think for the long term gain. And that's with all my brands. That's been the hardest part, was getting people from larger companies, because we talked about this one before. Can people in large companies work for small companies, and small companies work for large companies? Because small companies, whether you're in marketing, production or whatever, you've got to have a very broad, you've got to understand all of it. But a very large company, you're just in one small sector. So again, it's that diversity of people's minds on how. So it's you know, businesses, and it's just the same going through as a child, getting educated, starting off in juniors to going up to being a senior, to going to university, to going in the big world of how it fights on for the rest of its life, and how it ages and how it develops and how it looks after itself, I suppose. So that's probably the pivotal point, is scale to value to how. And I think this is where your innovation comes in now. So a lot of brands, if they made the same product and nothing else, as their outers went up, as the volume of sales went up, their average price per unit would have to go down, because the only way they could get more sales is to keep dropping the price, if they keep wanting to keep growing all the time. But if they're innovative and they could bring out something better or something more interesting, then as the sales grow, the actual average price grows with it, because they're innovating and they're bringing something out that other people haven't got.
Well, I don't really understand that. So say that again. So
if you look at, say, take Tyrrells for example, we had just potato chips, and if we just want to keep growing that and growing that and growing that, our outers would have grown up.
Outers.
I mean, the boxes, the amount of boxes we sold, or packets. Let's say the amount of packets as it grew went up, and the average cost would. We diluted a bit, but the average what we're earning on every outer would go down, because that's the only way you start dealing in big customers, giving them discounts, twofers and prices and support. But then we brought out the vegetable chips. So as the model grew, the vegetable chips were twice as expensive. When we brought the vegetable chips out, we thought, what should we price them at? And we thought, well, the amount of work they took we'd put them in at double the price. And they sold, and they carried on selling. So they were probably your champagne product. And they carried on.
That meant you could keep the RRP.
Keep the RRP.
Because when you had the RRP of the crisp versus the
exactly, and that's the Apple model.
That's
so
clever.
Apple, if they just made the same iPod that they made 20 years ago, they would have to be pretty well discounted now today. Like the BlackBerry didn't innovate, so it just sort of fell off. So the only way they can get more sales is to keep pushing it. But if you can innovate, and you can bring out something that's all the time doing something that nothing else is doing, And then for me, that's the secret sauce.
But then also you can keep the RRP and the margin of the main of the core range.
Exactly. So the original product that we want to get in every house, that every home, every kitchen is a kitchen essential. We can afford, we can afford as we go bigger, we can get the price right, and so we can afford to help get that in the places. But the secret sauce, the thing that nobody else has got, we've got a product here that's selling itself, and that's like our vegetable chips. If you compare it to Tyrrells, that's and it's selling so well. We're almost struggling to keep up with it at the moment.
That's the turmeric, right? Just for listeners. And so you just bang that first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
Empty stomach.
Yeah.
And that will just...
Not neat, obviously diluted, but...
really?
And the people
I think when you gave me one last time,
Really?
This is a bit intense,
you
mate.
Can. I taste the stuff every day, neat, but the best way is to dilute it down with a bit of water.
Interesting.
But then it's not just taking it. At the moment, 80-90% of the customers buying Willys and buying ACV are buying it as a daily dose, as a health product. But if we can get people to use it and to replace things like... Sarsens, malt vinegar, if we can replace, when you put it on your chips, why put just dead malt vinegar on your chips when you can actually put live, healthy, gut-healthy stuff on instead? So this is where the brand gets interesting. So if we can get an everyday product that
you need to increase the number of occasions.
Exactly, all day long. And even now, the most popular thing now is an alcohol alternative. If you're having a cocktail, if you put the Eureka in it, all you need to put with this is sparkling water.
There's an olive oil brand which is, I don't know whether this is Genius or Corrupt, but I think Genius and Corrupt are kind of interesting planes to play along. But it's called Graza, which they basically got olive oil.
It's genius. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and
you don't ask about the quality of the oil or something.
Yeah.
It just there's two.
Yeah, the sizzle and the drizzle.
Two sorts of olive oil. There's early season harvest, which is harvesting olives when they're green.
Yeah.
Which is what you with high antioxidants that you put on your food.
Yeah.
Or there's leave it to go till the end. It goes all yellow and it's at the end of the season.
You know this brand.
And that's it's
genius. Because also what they've done is they've got, so for listeners, it's an olive oil brand. They've put olive oil in a can which you can recycle. Basically, they've also got these squeezy bottles. The reason I think the squeezy bottles are genius.
Well, every chef,
is because that's how chef uses it. So when you're at home, the young foodie cook they're probably trying to target thinks, oh fuck me, this is how chefs in the restaurants do it.
It's genius.
And also the sizzle and drizzle, they're basically doubling their rate of sale.
But they're actually educating people at the same time.
Yeah.
Because nobody knew about early and late harvest olive oil.
Yeah, it's genius.
Hardly anybody knows that olive oil only lasts for a year.
Yeah.
How many people know that?
So the drizzle is the...
Is the late harvest. It's the older stuff.
So that's what you'd whack on a salad or a fucking...
The drizzle is the fresh, is the green. So when you look at olive oil, the greener it is...
Not the off one, the late one.
If you're pouring it on your salads or something, the greener it is, the better, the healthier it is. And the higher your antioxidants and your polyphenols are in it as well. So the later it is, the more tired it's getting, so the more yellow. So that's what you're using to cook with. So it's genius in the sense that it's hitting a few things. The one is the packaging. Is selling a recyclable packaging that everybody loves.
That's getting the good-looking boy or girl and dressing them up in Gucci
and against everybody
Supreme.
At the moment. People say, "Gosh, we can't use plastic. Plastic's out." But what do chefs use? Every single kitchen has refillable plastic squeezy bottles. Yeah. They don't want glass and they don't want Tetra Paks and different things in there. They want something that just... so that is very, very, very clever, and the rate of growth they're growing at now is just phenomenal.
Wild, yeah. Tell me about regenerative farming. Because I don't. Again,
the most interesting thing with that is nutrient dense, rich foods. Now,
but where's it going?
Like, and the reason with my story, I find it so fascinating, is if you asked me 10, 20 years ago, and you told me where I would be, I would never believe you. I would have classed organics and free from farmers as being probably tree huggers, or I'd call them. I would have said it's people doing it for just a hobby, and it's not sustainable to do it. And that was because of my growing up being brought by supermarkets to grow high value, low nutrition crops. In my Tyrrells days, and that was one of the reasons I set up Tyrrells, to go from being a potato farmer to making a product out of them, because I couldn't make the money out of growing high value. We were like a hamster on a wheel. You had to go bigger crops every year. So the most important thing with regenerative farming is we're talking about the nutrients. We're not talking about volumes and getting stuff cheap into McCain's and into McDonald's. we're talking about nutrition dense foods. We're talking about healthy food. So it's totally the opposite end of the scale. So it's, for me, for where I am with this business, it's so relevant, and it's the story. And I think with a brand, if you can tell a story at the same time, and there's one or two that are practicing quite well at this. There's ones like Riverford that Guy Watson's got. Riverford.
Perry did that as well.
He did, yeah. And that's a phenomenal brand, and he really wears his heart on his sleeve, and he is talking about sustainable. He's talking about the soil microbiome, not just the, so if you're, and again, it takes you back to your champagne, your pyramid again, but for me, I think everybody should be able to afford to buy organic food, and so it's how you cook it.
Have you heard of the brand Wild Farmed?
Yes.
Yeah, I was meant to do a podcast with them, but it got moved because I think they just launched into Waitrose. But with the regenerative, so it's all just the. I don't understand how it's
really regenerative is totally chemical, fertilizer free. Is letting the soil on its own do everything, feeding the soil. So with proper regenerative farming, you put more in than you take out. It's not all these things. It's not complicated. So with regenerative farming, you put more tons of organic matter in the ground than you physically take crop off the field. The way conventional farming's been done, you don't put anything in, you take off and you just put back a bit of artificial fertilizer. So you're not putting any organic matter back into it. So it'd be a bit like you as a human being living off pills. If you were living off pills and glasses of water, you could probably survive, but it wouldn't be as healthy as that nutritional, fresh, organic matter that you'd consume with your plant-based diet.
It's yeah, it's super interesting. I want to ask some random questions here. One is who's someone you wish you forgave earlier?
Oh, that's a good point, isn't it? Wow. I suppose myself, really, for naivety, for you get some people, they sort of almost blame their parents, or they blame different people, but I think it's education, and we're all responsible for our own education. So my education on food and food production has sort of gone from building these brands and being aware and being in it and actually finding out what's happening, where it's coming from, where it's going to. So
forgiving yourself.
So myself, I suppose. It's like when I had a 4-centimetre tumour in my gut and I had a life-changing operation to remove part of my intestines, I blame myself. I blame myself for my diet and what I'd eaten and how I'd lived. And it's like self-punishment almost, that you think, you think, why did I eat the wrong things and do the wrong things? So it's...
Yeah, I kind of agree. I agree with that. Did you ever have any enemies who drove you forward in business? Or people?
No, I've always loved competition. I think competition is healthy.
But has it ever got to the point where it's like it's been combustible? I'm just asking this myself. Is there's earlier when I was a kid, right? People would basically just tell me I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And they're not like, and it's people I sort of
Makes you want to do it even more.
But I just sort of I held too much resentment to it, to a point where it was like wind in the sails for the first bit, but then it just became like quite. It was, at one moment it was wind in the sails, then it became like a shackle on your ankles, and it's like you need to at some point let that shit go. Did you ever have that, or was that what?
Not really until probably this business, where there's all of the righteous people that say, and they think there is a book of rules, and they're not ready. We're almost going back in time with this. We're taking away all of the things we've done in the last 60, 70 years to food. We are trying to make fermented living foods back to as they were made many, many years ago in a commercial factory. Rather than doing it in a kitchen, we're doing it in a commercial factory. And that's the bit I think people find really interesting. We're trying to make traditional foods to scale in a modern commercial factory without all of the unnecessary additives and processes. So doing this, obviously it creates a bit of conflict with people that are in the market or other people coming into the market. So to answer your question, that would be where I think it's. But then it's a good thing, because if you're spurring a reaction, we're doing something good. We're changing things. We are.
Yeah, I completely agree. You need that. It's that constant 1%. Apple get better because of Samsung. Ferrari get better because of Red Bull. Mercedes get better because of both. It's that healthy competition. What's the current value that you hold that would be different if you were raised by different parents?
Oh, there's no ending to that, is there? That's a phenomenal question. I think we are what we are. Our DNA is, but then if they're different parents, you've got different DNA. So, and you're not you then. So I suppose that sort of self cancels itself in that sense. Or if you were who you are, and then you change, you were say adopted, you were changed, you changed parents, and you grew up.
Yeah, I suppose like
in a different sphere.
Yeah, it's almost like what are the values that you took from your parents that have been instrumental in building these brands.
Again, back to the 3 qualities in life you have to have, I think, to be a success. The first one is character. Second one is your work ethic, and the third one is not just your intellect, but your
I think the
ability.
work ethic thing is interesting. I think you said your work is your holiday on our last podcast, and I love that. And it's something I've referenced a lot in building Hungry over the last couple of years. 'Cause I think we spoke just when I'd gone full time on it, and I was listening to something yesterday, and the guy said almost founders complaining that it's really hard, and it's founders work 80-hour weeks so they don't have to work 40-hour weeks, and it's just a succinct way of basically saying you want to work 80 hours a week, but you could work 40 hours a week in Lloyd's in London and want to fucking, and also so there's that part to it, and I think that's where you work so much because it's like a holiday. Then have you heard of the guy called Paul Graham who did the Y Combinator? Big kind of tech Silicon Valley guy, writer, very writes lucidly well, very clear, punchy. But he's got a thing of saying, if you actually look at it, and there's 8 billion people in the world, and I don't have how he got to these numbers on me now. It's in one of his essays. He reckons only about 400,000 people actually find the thing they want to do and make their passion their profession. So I think actually being wildly grateful that you get to do this thing and your work is your holiday, because it is so easy when you're in this, oh my God, it's so hard being a founder, it's so hard that we got delisted, it's so hard. It's like, fucking go and work and stack the shelves in Tesco instead of complaining about Tesco. I think it's a really interesting lens to explore.
No, it is. That is it. That is it. And have all those guys, have they all got ADHD and are they bipolar? And they must have, because they must have something that drives them, that makes them do this, because it is so much work. It's like so absorbing. It's like everybody wants to become an entrepreneur. They all want to be a builder. They all want to do it until they're actually in it. And then the next thing is that there's so few people that want to give, that want to. It depends. It's a balance between how hungry you want success and how much you're prepared to sacrifice to get it, and how hard you're prepared to work for it as well.
Would you have given away all your sort of money and material possessions to have more of a clean, like, balanced mind, retrospectively?
Yeah, I think knowledge is worth more than money.
Knowledge is worth... But I mean, in terms of that bipolar up and down...
No, I think without that...
You wouldn't have your
yin and yang.
Exactly.
So if you were a boring person that vibrated, not there's anything wrong with it, but if you didn't have bipolar or ADHD or any of these, or you didn't have dyslexia, and you were probably a normal person, shall we say? I don't know where all this is going to come out, but it's going to come out somewhere. So if you frequent like this every day, so you're up a little bit one day and down a little bit the next week, you don't like this. Or if you're up here or you're down here, if you're down here, the lower you get the lows, the higher it makes your highs, because it's like a roller coaster. The more it charges you, that you want to get out of that low. If you're in a low, you so desperately want to get out of it.
How do you...
And the high is so much fun that when you're going down again, you say, let's have some more of that. So when you're going down to the low again,
yeah,
you
that's
want
what
to
I
get
was going to
back
ask you.
up there.
So how do you think the low has been instrumental in the brand building?
Oh, everything. Everything.
How so?
Because I think I've managed it by trying to find success. So success to me is trying to find that way where you can make things work. And success is not guaranteed. Success is it's so difficult to find it, and then sometimes it doesn't last long, or it's a really, that's a fantastic question, because it's how, back to those people you mentioned, they would have been seeking that. They wouldn't be here all the time. People look at a lot of guys, like whether it's Elon Musk or Gates or whoever, they think they're not up here all the time. Everybody talks about, you have to have the failures, you have to have the lows to have the highs. Not everything in life is a success. That's what I love about, what's her name? She does a podcast with How to Fail by Elizabeth Day, is it?
Yeah, she's amazing, yeah.
And she's made a fantastic stories out of that. But out of failure comes success. And we've all had failures. And if you look at most geniuses, you think I've had a lot more failures than I've had successes. I've had hardly any successes compared to my failures. And my failures, is what you learn to get your successes. And the other thing I love about entrepreneurship is, I think Doyle said this with Dollar Shades, was the wonderful thing about an entrepreneur is, and I always thought entrepreneur is an awful word until I heard Doyle describing it, and he's an entrepreneur, somebody who can, once something goes bad, or you've got a bad deal, you've got to learn to bury it, and you've got to get rid of it, and you've got to move on. You mustn't let it come with you. If it drags on with you, it'll tow you down. Yeah. So you've got to learn from your fail fast, fall fast, and like Perry says, you've got to fail fast, get that out of the way, and use that to succeed, and use that to try and succeed, because success isn't guaranteed. Success is only there if you're lucky.
I love that. I love that way I love the way you're describing that low as almost, you're using that as almost a launch pad to go
that's
high.
That's your momentum.
That's momentum.
Because when you're falling, none of us want to fall.
The virtuous cycle.
Yes.
Momentum equals magic. Magic equals momentum, and vice versa. It's like the magic's on the way up.
Yes.
And it has to go down to go back up, and that's the momentum. It's that kind of, that is actually equaling that, which is getting the snowball going.
Exactly.
Which is super fascinating. What do you believe is a universal truth, but is actually just a norm to this unique culture we're in?
I think the fact that there are no rules. I think we have to learn. We have to learn for ourselves. There's no book of rules. There's no book of rules. There's no. Everybody thinks in life that there's a proper way to do things in the universe. They think there's a wicked witch in the world, or there's something somewhere. Everybody thinks there's a way of doing things, but there's not. It's for you to find out. Everybody you talk to with and I'm not really that happy with the entrepreneur thing, because I think it's almost got, I think a builder, we had this conversation last time.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And entrepreneurs are romanticised to fuck.
They are. And entrepreneurs are people who just drop on, they buy businesses, probably pull them apart or do different things. But a builder is somebody who has the imagination and the foresight to build something from scratch, and if it doesn't work, the builder is looking for the way to put it together to make it a success. So I think builders are, a builder is...
I saw a picture on your Instagram. I obviously did a little bit of a stalk of the Cologne Cathedral.
Yeah.
And one of my fascinations, and I think you find this in entrepreneur, I write a lot, and I find it in writing, is awe. Like,
yes.
I think people use the word awesome without actually realising what it means, like awesome. And the word awe really, I think brands, and awe is synonymous with magic, with secret sauce. What was, in terms of the building, this is where I'm going to this, is what was the awe that kind of pulled you into that? And it took 600 years to build that cathedral. Yeah,
3 things in my life I've seen. The first thing was, and all fairly recently as well, but I think probably in the last 2 years as well, Cologne Cathedral, when you actually see it and you go inside, and not all cathedrals have a power, but Cologne Cathedral has such a sort of Catholic, but it has such massive power in it when you go in. And when you realise, in the space of time, if you stand in the middle of Cologne Cathedral and you think this took 600 years to build...
Why did it take so long? What, they need to get some JCB diggers.
but just to comprehend 600 years. The other one is the Taj Mahal. That only took 16 years. That was nothing to build a Taj. But every elephant, every marble stone wasn't local. It came from about 1,000 miles away. Every marble stone came on an elephant. So if you think how many marble stones there was in the Taj, that was built by a guy who had 14 sons. 3 of his sons tried to kill him. 1 succeeded in the end.
Why do they build? Sorry, this sounds so dumb, but like, why did they build the Taj Mahal? Like,
it was just his palace, his house.
And is that now? Was he the king of India or something like that?
Yeah, no, he was just a noble guy, but he wanted to build. He was a very noble guy, but then he wanted to build one for his wife across the river as well. That you can just see the base of it, but. You could read about Cologne Cathedral. You could read about the Taj Mahal. You could read about the tiger's nest in Bhutan.
What's the tiger's nest?
And that was the third. That's what I went to do recently. Was when I went to look for the Buddhas, and I went to go and find the answers. And it's a massive hike to get up there, and especially to get the mountains up above it. But it's how they built those things in the days. And how they got all the materials up there and they made it. But all the romance and the magic behind it as well. It was actually a tiger's nest, and there's a cave where the tiger was. And there's the whole Buddhism thing. When you go and see it, without me sounding like I've met a god or something, it's quite... It's quite inspiring to go and see those things. And again, you have to go and see it to believe it, because you can get the numbers. It's like Beijing. Anybody can tell you how big Beijing is, but if you can't land and you've got to be in a plane and fly around, and it's not like flying around London. You don't fly around the whole of London. You fly around a little part of Beijing or a few little, and it's like so big.
But you look out the window. You have
to physically see that.
There's a link here, right?
There's
a link here.
9/11. You go to Ground Zero. I went there not long, a few months after it happened, when I first started Tyrrells, and I couldn't believe. When you see it, you see it on the TV, but when you actually go and see it in real life and you look at it,
there's a link here to brand building. So to experience the awesome, you have to go
thinking big, and
you have to go and see it. And see it is basically being in it. And you know what we were talking about earlier about being in the trenches. I think if you want to create an awesome brand, you have to be in it. Like that, you seeing the Cologne Cathedral, you are seeing the Taj Mahal, you're seeing the tiger's nest, so all moments of awe, but you have to fucking see it. You can't go on Google Images.
To believe the work, if you built things yourself, to believe the work involved in building it, the sheer, and in the days when they didn't have anything we had today, it was all done by sort of...
It's crazy.
Phenomenal.
But I think seeing things like that, and one of my other passions at the minute is... maximalism versus minimalism. Mm-hmm. So in architecture, food, the way we write, the way we communicate, we've all moved from maximalism, and probably the greatest delicious example of maximalism is something like the Cologne Cathedral, all the old books,
Seeing is believing.
Yeah, you have much richer texture and depth to them. Whereas now, if we look at minimalism, so you've got, minimalist homes. It's all these, if you go down some of these rivers, you've got those Hofhaus fucking things. Because of the word processor and LinkedIn.
They can build them in, 2 or 3 days?
Yeah, well, LinkedIn and ChatGPT, we're moving to this minimalism, whereas everything you're reading now, almost post-Hemingway, is super short.
Yes.
We've lost long sentences and big words, which is not necessarily bad. There's wrong and right in both of this.
Yeah.
In terms of the word processor made email communication, which is amazing. Again, there's no wrong or right, but it's like we've moved from this delicious maximalism to minimalism. You also see it in brands. There's a thing I saw the other day of all the designer logos from Burberry to Yves Saint Laurent, whatever you say it, have all moved. I think the thing that their logo in the 1900s or early 1900s, about 100 years ago to now, even Google, they've all lost that kind of richness and texture. And I think when you go and see something like that, there's
it puts it into perspective.
Yeah,
it gives it a perspective.
Yeah, and I think it's that seeing stuff like that can be awe-inspiring and can. It adds a level to things.
But I thought, say with the birth of Tyrrells, I had the idea in October 2021, and then by April 2000. So if we revert this to Tyrrells, when I had the idea of getting things done, I had the idea in 2001 in October. by April 2002, I had a fully functional built. I'd emptied the shed of potatoes, I built a factory, and I had a fully functional brand with 4 flavours on the market selling. So I still ask myself today, how did I do that in 6 months with no Google? I had to go and sneak into factories and go to America to go and find the machines and how to do it. And I think, and I don't know how I did it. And when I look back today, and we talk about mobile phones and Google and everything you have today, but I did that, and I still question how I just managed to go and make it so simple, the operation of going to find the people to build it for me, to do it, to actually get it done in that time. Like today, you couldn't even build a factory in 6 months, let alone put all the kit in it and build a brand and get your packets and get lots of problems with it, massive problems. I bought a machine for nuts and bolts, and every 5th packet had a hole in it, and we had to throw it away, and all the usual problems. But it was just incredible how did that. And then when I take it to those other things I just mentioned, like seeing the Taj, and that's like nothing at all. Do you know what I mean? It's a drop in the ocean. So
yeah, it makes you put things into perspective, and I think that's a massive thing on mental health as well.
It is
when you see something like that, you realise how finite your time here is.
Yes.
Like it's just so fleeting. So fuck it, enjoy it. And that thing's been around for 600 years. It's going to be around for another 600 years.
Yeah.
And like your moment is so fleeting. So just. I think having magnetism and maximalism makes you realise how tiny you are, and I think that's a real.
And it's your own ego trip versus what you actually want to achieve out of it in the end of it.
And also, I think the other thing is this with the Stoics is they talk about how, like, I think Marcus Aurelius talks about how whatever problem you're going through, someone, it may have a slightly different flavour, has been through it before.
Yeah, this too shall pass. That's probably the best Stoic line for mental because when you're all suffering and you're all, this too shall pass.
How often do you snap in and out of the highs and lows now? Because who was I listening to? Someone talking about almost not being able to mitigate when it bubbles up and when it doesn't bubble up. It's almost like you wake up and it's either there or it's not. And
the darkness, monkeys, the monkey mind.
The monkey mind.
Controlling it.
How do you kind of, say before it was 10 days, looking at 10 days, say it was on, off, on, off, on, off.
Yeah.
Say we were to look at a month, how often does it crop up and crop down, go up? How often does the roller coaster go up and down, up and down?
I think it depends what I'm doing,
where
I am. So, and that's physically, because the best thing I think you should do when you're building a brand, which I'm very guilty of not doing, is to make yourself redundant. And that is probably the biggest problem I've had with trying to find management and people. And their biggest mistake of the average person that wants to get into management is you must never be afraid to take on anybody better than yourself.
That's what you've been afraid of?
No, I've not. I've always been looking for somebody. I want to be made redundant. I'd love people to come into a business to make me redundant so I can go on and do. So, and it's always this thing about micromanaging people and how to leave people to it and to... And,
are you the sort of founder who would go in... because I would definitely... I've got founderitis, which is whereby... So I've now got a little team. It's still a little team doing the podcasts. And I'm giving them more agency with kind of writing some of the content.
Yeah.
But I will flip out and be like, well, that's not in the right tone of voice. Or like, that's not how it should be said. And then then I'm trying to retract back and be like, fuck me, like this guy hasn't been in the business for long, and it's...
I'm guilty of that, and I think it's like letting go. And it's physically empowering people to do a job and to leave them alone to get on with it. I think it's because if you work for something, that's what you'd want. If you'd work for something, you'd want somebody to say, this is the job. You wouldn't want to be micromanaged every hour or so. You'd want to be allowed to get on with it and do your job. And so that's the secret to management, I think, is to find individuals who want to find people that are better than themselves. They're always looking. And that, again, I'm probably going into the wrong territory here talking about this, but that, again, is where it's a good thing to be bipolar or have... Because if you look at Microsoft and these companies, this is what they're looking for. They're looking for minds that can actually think outside the box. They're not looking for they're looking for people who can who are looking for solutions. We all want solution finders. We don't want people that keep coming up with problems. We want to find solutions to those problems. So how, and you've got to have the mind to sort of think big enough or think outside the box to find the solution to that as well. And that's why I think if you spend too much of your life in a big company being restricted, you can never break out. So I think the whole builder thing needs to start quite young, when you never see the boring side of it about being restricted. Nobody'd ever want to be in a job where they're watching the clock for the end of the day to come.
This is what I'm saying. Founders work 80-hour weeks. They don't have to work 40-hour weeks. I've done that where I've literally watched the clock, and I was going, I think I was like 19, doing data input. I was like, oh my God, this is horrendous. I can't do this. And I think it's, yeah, that's why, I work incredibly hard on this, but it's coming from a place of gratitude, because of like, it doesn't feel like work, and it feels like a holiday. A few more things and then we'll wrap this up, mate. But you've gone to, you read a lot of books, and I'd love to know, I think we were talking last time about, there was a book that you were like reading in Ibiza, and you just threw it off into the water.
Oh, it's called Letting Go.
yeah, Letting Go, that was it. It's hilarious. Yeah, you literally let it go.
I did.
What are some of the other books that have really got you, wet your whistle, kind of pulled at your curiosity recently?
I don't know. I think the more it's being inspired, but then it's going back to the greats, like Shoe Dog, Phil Knight's, books like that. There's just nothing to beat that, is there? I think it's just so difficult to find a story to beat. He's
got the best quote, which goes, "I was running away from a monster and running down a monster," in that book, and I think that's the perfect example of challenger brands. I suppose with you potentially, it's like running away from the bipolar, but running towards the dream of like.
And this is such a fantastic subject, because once it's going and it's a success, whether it's Elon Musk, Gates, whoever it is, once your ball's rolling. How fast it rolls but to me, it's still getting that ball rolling. So I love looking at new startups where it's a clever idea. You talked about Grazier with the olive oil. That is just simple genius. That is to sell an everyday product. Yeah. And what is the success of a brand?
How do you spell it? Grazier.
Grazier. It's after a town in Spain, isn't it?
What are some of the most interesting food and drink businesses at the minute, in your opinion?
I think Amelia with bold beans.
Yeah.
I've always thought there's room for a posh baked beans. I think she's doing a phenomenal job with that.
Do you know her well? Or
yeah. I think she's brilliant. And then we've got quite a few little startups. I think she's doing an amazing job with that. I think Roz from Borough Broth, I think she's a fantastic girl, just like Amelia. They're doing things on their own, and they're looking for answers, and they're finding out how to grow it.
So is broth really good for you?
Phenomenal now, yeah. And Roz, there's lots of brands. There's 3 or 4 brands out there, and there's some brands but Roz is really she wears her heart on her sleeve, and she talks about the story. So as a founder business, I'd put her, she's just, she just laughs and jokes about all the problems and everything. She's a great talker, great person. Yes, it's people that are genuinely finding the magic. So I'd say those 2 at the moment are doing an amazing job, because they're just so motivated. That they'd both be genuinely doing over 80 hours a week, more, and they're making it happen. They're looking for it, finding the magic, and making it happen. And then
what would you, so yeah, because do you invest in a lot of brands, or not really?
A little bit. I always take an interest in. And then there's, we've seen a lot of great things. We've seen things like Ruby's with the ketchup. You've seen Jack and Alex with Dash. There's a lot of great startups, and they're more than startups now, and they're going and they're running. And what they say, the average company lasts for 7 years, isn't it? At the moment, it's less than that. It's down to 6. And I think the interesting thing is the last 6 years, we've seen more companies built, more new brands come to market. I think I was talking to Pearl Fisher or somebody a few years ago, and they were just saying that it's like Victorian times. There are so many people starting up now.
This is why I think food and drink. If you go to Soho House now. And maybe not Soho House because you can't work in finance, but 10, 15 years ago, it was all the rage to go and say you worked at RBS or the big banks, whereas now you get probably as a millennial, you get more gravitas and kind of, I don't know, hip is probably, I sound like a fucking granddad saying that, hip, but like you get more kudos if you say, oh, I've got my own food and drink business. But I think this is what we were talking about in our first conversation, is it's like how many people are buying into the romanticism of having a food and drink business so they can put it on LinkedIn and actually whereas actually going, and this is why I said if you reframed it, if you were to line up loads of people and say, right, you can put your hand up and say I'm going to be an entrepreneur, everyone will put their hand up. Like, but if I was to say, right, who wants to be a builder? When you think of builder, you think of building a fucking brick house. It's not romantic. No one will put their hand up. But actually,
and how many people would actually give 80 hours a week? Would give up all their life savings? Would give up their relationship with everybody to put the business? There aren't many. It's a really lonely.
Been the how have you navigated that? Like the friendships, relationships versus pouring your soul into that, because I think that again a lot of all of this is balance and nuance.
It is.
So what's been the detriment to and what have you learned from, I suppose, each Tyrrells to Chase to Willie's? Like,
it comes as a price. That's the price that
what's the price?
It's just you can only do so many things at a time, and it's how it absorbs you and takes your time and takes your it absorbs you, doesn't it? It absorbs so much out of you. It takes a lot of understanding from everybody around it to how much is involved, I guess, to get it going. That's why I just said that my advice to anybody, if they get one success, is to stick with it. I don't know why I went all over.
But then, you've got to give more. And I think you should, again, go back to forgiving yourself. You should be kind to yourself, because the amount of founders, and I listen to a lot of these podcasts, they sell their first business, and they think I've got the divine right to do it again, and they flop.
It was the second album, isn't it? It's the one hit wonder.
Yeah, it's like, well, what happened to S Club 7? You know?
But it almost gets like addictive then. You've got to try and do something better.
Yeah.
And it almost
I'm kind of at this moment now with the potentially doing the second podcast, because it's like, do I need to do that? Is it a distraction? Do I do more of this? But it is that kind of, it's tricky. But
I think you do it the way you do it. You're very genuine. So what you're talking about, we're not talking about corporatizing it too much.
Well, that's there was a big corporate who wanted to potentially buy Hungry, and they were like, oh, you've got to just basically cut it down to 45 minutes, take out the swearing, and I'm just like, that's not me, so I'm never going to do that. Like, that is literally the most pointless thing in my mind. But it's interesting. So what did you learn from each in terms of it absorbing you?
That's a fantastic point. And so if I was going to take the positives out of it, if you said, I travelled a lot with Tyrrell, so as soon as I built Tyrrells, the first year I was on a plane. I was a busy potato farmer. I'd probably been on a plane once a year to go on holiday.
What were some of the places you went to?
That. I did 40 flights in the first year, so I went all around the world, and I was not just to. As soon as I started Tyrrells, I wanted to export it straight away. I found out about the UKTI and they'd pay for you to go to UK Trading Industry were paying people to go to different parts of the world. So they'd actually pay you. They'd sort it all out. I went on one last year with to India. And it's just amazing how they'll fix it all up for you. So you do these shows and events and you can meet. But you meet the whole culture. It's not just trade. It's actually meeting the culture through the government as well.
It's what I find fascinating is you understand your culture more by immersing yourself in other cultures.
Yeah, I try and look from the outside.
So what are some of the cultures that you immerse yourself in on those 40 flights that taught you more about our culture?
I think the first thing when I started Tyrrell's being a humble potato farmer, to getting on a plane to flying to and from. And did I tell you that story? That I went out there to go and buy the kit, and I went in this factory and they wouldn't tell me anything about it. So I was in New York, and I had this packet of crisps, and I was just having a visit in the plaza, meeting somebody in there, and there was a packet of crisps, and it got this guy called Ken Potter on it. It said, call me, with his number. So I called him, and he said, yeah, don't miss the plane, come and see me. He said, I'll get you sorted out, I'll show you where to buy your cookers and things from. And it was like the American spirit. And he introduced me to these sort of Amish Mennonite guys that built all the fryers and things for Tyrrells.
Amish.
There were sort of all of the sort of German settlers around New Holland that had sort of the
Where's
ones.
New Holland?
It's just left of Philadelphia. It's where all the guys wear black and they don't have tractors, they have horses, and they do. Have you watched that Harrison Ford film, The Fugitive? It's where he goes and hides. But it was just what was interesting about that was that gave me the taste for Tyrrells, you could say. Did the export put any value onto, although places like Monoprix in France was one of our best customers, they just sell millions.
What is Monoprix?
Monoprix is probably the Waitrose of France, if you like.
Right, yeah.
And then with the distillery, I made a point of doing every country, all key 40 countries, and I did it with Tyrrells, and I'm doing it now with Willys. I've got a thing in a couple of weeks going to Australia to go and, with the government thing then as well, to go and, where they take you around and they,
But yeah, what were some of those cultures that really going to another country
the first thing
is a mirror to your own culture.
Going to America as a humble potato farmer, going to build this brand and this factory, to get so inspired by the way the Americans were so simple. Because there's one factory we went to see. They'd been in business for 100 years and they just come up with their first barbecue flavour. They just making like barbecue chips and they were still cooking them in beef shortening and things. And what it taught me, that first trip, is, as I said, it's just after 9/11, it taught me the Americans are nothing like us. I thought they'd be just like us.
I was writing about this morning. So I basically said, I said Los Angeles is not Lancashire, was the kind of the crude way of putting it. But the easiest way to understand this is same product, completely different. You know the TV program The Office, the one with Ricky Gervais is the English one, the American one with Steve Carell. It's the same premise, completely different shows,
different humour,
humans. I think people look at an American, we think we're so similar, but we're so.
Oh no, we're totally different. Totally. And that just shows you that their world
fashion sense is miles behind.
and then in the food industry, there's Expo West, a show there every year.
I'm going with Perry next year
in LA, and try and do that. And that's a phenomenal show, and that is because you've got Silicon Valley. So you've got Silicon Valley to start with, and then you've got the film industry. So in one place in the world, you've got the two key industries that are going to be anything that's trending. So if it's avocados, kombucha, there's GT Dave is the kombucha billionaire now that lives there, and any trend that starts off is in LA. So whatever it is, and the whole thing from smashed avocados on sourdough bread, in most boutique hotels will be serving it now, to whatever you're having. Kefir, it all starts in LA. So it would be the key point to new food trends, probably as the world develops, even in Melbourne and places like that.
What are your thoughts in terms of the mental health stuff, on like all these nootropics and the kind of the microdosing of mushrooms, psilocybin?
Fantastic.
So I've got a mate who's got a business called High and Dry. Had mental health. And I said had mental. I think we all go through fluxes, right? But he's done. A guy interviewed the other week as well. Actually, got a brand called Non-Alcohol-Free Wine. Did our ayahuasca, one of those ceremonies. Have you ever tried any of those things? Where do you think that market's going in terms of not just, full throttles ayahuasca, then probably mushrooms, then more of these?
Well, 6 years ago, the key take-homes from Expo West, first of all, was mushrooms. Mushrooms had just started, mushroom teas. So that was like 5 or 6 years ago. Now it's massively trending. Women-owned business, for the whole equality thing, for the whole balance. And then other things like plant-based, making snack bars and foods out of insects, and all of this. And at the same show was things like CBD. That was just coming, so the whole sort of CBD revolution with canopy growers, and that was just sort of starting.
So that was 5 years ago.
Out there then 5 years ago.
What about recently?
No, we've had COVID, so probably more than that now. Probably 6 years ago that show was 18 or 19. So what's really interesting is that's where, and if you get out there, you get to see it. You're looking at it from the outside. Sometimes too much information can be dangerous. But the point was, we were having a conversation earlier as well, was how about travel and expanding your mind, like going to the Tiger's Nest or going to see the Taj, or even going to see an importer distributor in Cologne. Every time I've travelled, I've done it with the business. So every time I've been, if I was going to Cologne Cathedral, it's to go and see our German importer. You know what I mean? If I go to see the Tiger's Nest, it was all part of going to Kathmandu to meet some guys, and then to go up there to talk about the whole buckwheat thing and I
think the founder starting a business is as much a quest. If we're looking at this through the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, right?
Yeah.
Is much a quest in terms of helping people through a better product, which helps them, but it's also invariably a quest of self. You know, you can use your business as a vehicle on your own quest, whether that's you going to Kathmandu or the Cologne Cathedral. You learn that 40 countries is as much as world chases self-discovery and growth as it is the business growth.
And it's the mind, but the key thing I've learned from it is you said, right, in the last 20 years since you started Tyrrells, did that put any value onto Tyrrells travelling? Chase Distillery, being in 40 countries, in bars, across the whole world, in all the key bars from Hong Kong, Singapore, Shanghai, to Munich. Did that put any value into the business? And I don't know if it probably did, actually, because the value of those businesses wouldn't have been greatly affected by that. So the physical value of the company being there didn't. But for me, the builder, trying to put it together, to go and see all those cultures and to look at the brand, see what's going on. Because if I hadn't sold Tyrrells, I was on the verge of buying a vacuum fryer. And we just got ready just to buy it. So if I hadn't sold Tyrrells, I would have spent another 4 million on this vacuum frying line.
What's a vacuum fryer?
So you fry your chips and things under a vacuum. So instead of having acrylamide, you keep the oil temperature down. It's like boiling a kettle on a mountain, basically, that it boils at a low temperature. So you can reduce the fat by half. You can fry things like beetroots and even carrots and beef tomatoes, anything you could fry. And that was going to be like half fat, lot low fatter. And again, it was sort of great pioneering staff, but you need the business big enough and strong enough and financially strong to be able to go and get into a category like that. So that came about from my travelling. So it's all ifs and buts and maybes. But when I look back at the brand now and I go and see, say, Tyrrells now somewhere in Corsica in a Monoprix, and it's still got a massive section in there, that's still quite a warm. I remember the first meeting with Monoprix. So it still resonates, that it lasts. It's building relationships.
I love education, which you cannot get through business books and, now probably podcasts. I think different inputs equal different outputs.
Yeah.
Read the same books as everyone else, you create the same content as everyone else. That's why I call it saying to Perry, the brandemic. The blandemic.
Yes.
All brands look the same, every brand's looking the same. So you have this holistic 40-flight, deep, rich learnings from that time, and as you say, I think there's often something you can see as literal impact on the business, which is okay. We're in these countries; it's on the P&L. This is this country brings an X, and that may not have been big. And you said, did it make any difference? But I think there's a richer learning, and that's what I said. The growth of the founder runs in parallel with the growth of the brand. If you could boil those learnings down into like 1 or 2 or 3 principles, what would they be from that kind of gallivanting globe gallivanting?
So if I was going to reduce them down, one is the world's a big place and there's a lot of people out there, and it's a very sobering thing, as I said, to go and look at those places and to learn all this different fusion of cultures and how to deal with. It's like different customers. Countries are the same. You've got to get in their mindset. You've got to see where they are first before you can sell to them. So, and the most important thing then of that to take home from that, I think for myself personally, if I said from my journey of selling a brand and starting off again, selling a brand, starting again, is would I have changed the last 20 years to travel all those thousands of flights? None of them on holiday. Everything was business. It's been a phenomenal ride to go and see those countries, not as a tourist, as business, to forming relationships and partners with importers, to retailers, to even farmers. So now I'm travelling now. I'm not just going to like Australia to meet our importer, distributor and different retailers, but I'll actually want to go and see a couple of regenerative farmers as well. So it adds. So would I have changed the last 20 years doing all those thousands of flights, travelling to all corners for my own personal selfishness? No, I've learned so much. I probably learned too much, and it's probably cluttered my mind with too many things, because every time you do something, it's a totally different subject, from the snacks market to the spirits market to the to the whole vinegar and fermented foods market. It's a complete abstract. It's a different thing. So, but it's just, so back to that subject about people, it's trying to find people that would want, I would have thought there'd be more people that would want to come and join and come and do that. But most people only want to join when the company is bigger. Do you know what I mean? Than risk it to start with at the very beginning. There are very, very few people that will want to come and...
What country took you by the most surprise, and what did you learn from it?
Always been America. I think America...
Other than America?
Other than America, second one is probably Australia, is Melbourne. Melbourne is the most...
Melbourne's like a hotbed for brands.
Melbourne is phenomenal. What's the most impressive thing? I was doing a food show the other day with somebody on a cook show, and it was the most interesting thing with Melbourne is the culture, because they don't have a historic culture. It's like a pot of, you've got Chinese, you've got French, you've got Italian, you've got Korean, you've got all these different influences in Melbourne. It's just, there's a place in Melbourne called the City Wine Store, and if you're into wines and into sort of different food, they make, there's Kievs out of lamb and different things. It's just the whole balance. And like smoking meats and the whole sort of street food, that was like 10 years ago in Melbourne, was like standard fixed practice. Big smokers outside of restaurants where they're smoking and the meats. And it's an incredible place. Melbourne is so on top of it. I'd say it would have been LA, but I'd say Melbourne now. And Melbourne's a lot more natural. It's not so paid. Melbourne's still the only city you can probably drive in the middle and park in most places on sort of Brunswick Street and places where you can go and...
What do you mean, as in like you can just
sort of drive in?
Comparatively to...
Oh, it's big. It's like the most impressive place in Melbourne was the casino. It's apparently the only casino, one of the only ones with a morgue in it, where there's like a main road going in and a main road going out. So it's pretty big.
How big comparatively to London?
It would be similar, but it'd be quite a bit bigger because it's spread out over a lot bigger area. But it's just a very chic place. It's not like Sydney would be like London. Sydney is very business orientated, very fast. But then Melbourne is just, if you're into marketing or art and design and
they've got loads of brands out there. They've got Who Gives a Crap.
Yeah.
I interviewed the founder of that, Simon Griffiths, Melbourne.
Yeah.
Non, my mate's Aaron.
Yeah.
I was telling you about. He's got a brand based out of there. What's the other one? Aesop.
Mm-hmm. You go into the Aesop shop in Melbourne, and it is just with all the cork, and it's really inspiring. It's a phenomenal place to go and see.
Well, I've absolutely loved that. I think we can keep. I could talk to you for hours, but I think
you got something in there.
I've got loads. It's one of my favourites we've done, and super grateful. I really appreciate that.
Thanks, fantastic. It's a good, interesting.